serious, has a friend ever done / said something that just straight up ended the friendship? What happened? A guy I considered my friend and crush once told me he wouldn't care if I died. Needless to say, I was heartbroken. Edit. Thank you kind strangers for your words. To those of you wondering about the context, here it is. I posted about it the other day because I'm just now coming to terms with it. So, I used to be a nice girl. I had a minute-long crush on any guy who would give me attention, and I was super emo and angsty, partially because of a difficult home life. I was clingy with my friends and really socially awkward. I'll be me, and the guy can be N for nice guy. Our school guidance counselor will be GC. We were both 15. N was a band geek, obsessed with the girls in color guard and the one girl in his band group. While I was more of a shy nice girl who mostly got her feelings out with punk music, N was very extroverted, saying he loved being constantly surrounded by beautiful women of the color guard who loved me, and often gave girls, including me for a time, unsolicited, very tight hugs all the time. He was no catch, but I was looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. All of our mutual friends knew that I liked him by this point, and they had all encouraged me to just go for it already. I had come out to N about liking him the day before, and I'd had this overwhelming crush on him for over a year by then. I was devastated by this. I had our first date built up in my head and a consuming idea of what a happy couple we would be like together. He gave me an honest answer, and I can respect that now, but I didn't want to take no for an answer back when I was a moronic 15-year-old. It was at the beginning of lunch, and no one else had sat down at our friend table yet. I sat down in my usual seat next to N, and he started talking to me like nothing had happened the day prior. I refused to act like nothing had happened and confronted him. I pretty much went off on him about how I would be great for him, very nice girl, and said something along the lines of, I can't keep living like this, being just your friend. He replied, then don't live. I don't care. My face went red, and I ran into the bathroom to cry. I thought I loved him in my 15-year-old head because he could make me feel normal. When he told me that, I took it as him telling me to kill myself and began a downward spiral where I actually wanted to for years. N and someone I thought was my friend began to bully me after that, saying I was not welcome and that I was a loser. I heard through the grapevine that he called me a crazy beach stalker girl at one point. We were all in the same honors classes, of which there was only one of each small school, so there was nothing I could do about it, unless I wanted to completely change the trajectory of my school life and drop honors. Here's where the story takes a major twist. N's mom was friends with the school's only guidance counselor, who was in charge of making class schedules and taking charge with problem children who were at risk with drugs or violence. One day I was walking quickly, behind N apparently, so I could put my stuff down in class and go to the bathroom like I always did at this time of day. GC called my dad without me knowing and called him to the office for a meeting with the entire school's administration staff. My dad took off work and went to the school, thinking that my newfound reclusive behavior may have been a sign that I was getting into drugs and the school was worried. Instead, my dad went through what he described to me as a circular conversation with GC and the rest of the administration. He was instructed not to tell me this, but he did anyway. The people told my father that he had to shut me up and make me leave N alone. They said that I was causing trouble for one of their brighter and more popular students, and that they had school cam footage they would present to the police of me stalking him through the halls if they had to. Since that infamous I don't care day, I have been hospitalized 3 times for attempted suicide. I had gone off the deep end, almost hurting and during a horrible panic attack. I had cried openly in front of people I barely knew in school. N and one of our mutual friends started bullying me, and I eventually had to move towns and change schools because it wasn't going to stop. I have one friend that I still talk to from that school. The others I tried to talk to afterward, but it didn't really work out. I have since gone through an underage drinking phase and a hoe phase, both of which I have gotten over entirely. I will probably be on anti-anxiety medication for the rest of my life, but I have since found religion and made peace with myself over what happened. I have forgiven N, and I think the final part of that was writing out the main details and posting. So thank you. And that's what happens when a nice girl likes a nice guy. They're both immature and pretty terrible. But things aren't all bad. That friend I mentioned, that I keep up with, we've been dating for over a year now, and we told each other that we love one another for the first time just last week. Edit 1. Feel free to ask me any questions for clarity. Sorry, I forgot to mention that in the first place. Edit 2. Feel free to ask me questions does not mean tell me off, or say that this was all my fault in the comments. I understand and have come to terms with the fact that I did wrong and could have handled myself better in the situation. So telling me that I was the only one in the wrong, that I deserved all that happened to me, or that I corned then will not fly. Thank you. Alright, so my ex-friend, we'll call her Ankle, and I used to be the closest, like we lived at each other's houses, but unfortunately we just kinda drifted away. Nothing wrong with them or anything, and I was kinda sad, but whatever, it happens. Anyway, we smile in the hallways. This is at school, and Yano had small talk, and we were still in the same friendship group. But then one day I go to school, and break rolls around, and I go to hang out with a group and Ankle is mad at me. I have no clue why, right? I haven't done anything. And so I try talking, but she is so mad that she just ignores me and goes away, and I wasn't forcing an answer, I was like, why aren't you talking to me? In a kind voice, yet still no response. So I decide to text her and say, hey, why are you mad at me? I didn't do anything like spill a secret etc. I'm sorry for whatever I did. And that was the last text message I sent. And keep in mind that Ankle was on a cruise and wasn't going to be back for a few weeks, so all I could do was text. And so a few days later she responds with this message. It's copy and paste, so look, I just got annoyed how you keep annoying me about the English thing, and then when I tried to explain that argument was a misunderstanding, you didn't listen, and I was sick of the fact that you hardly treat me like a friend, and then you were all up in my life about the English thing, and then some shit went down, don't wanna explain, and I just got overwhelmed and didn't wanna talk before bad stuff comes out to my mouth. And I make things worse. So yeah, it's all good now though. Sorry for putting you through all this shit. I totally get if you don't wanna be my friend, all I ask is that you can forgive me. And it's okay, you don't need to be sorry, I'm just being a moody teen, I guess, lol. I hope all is good now. Kind regards, Ankle. Now here's the thing, I asked about the English thing once. She never tried to explain it, the argument was a misunderstanding, so yeah, I guess I didn't listen cause it never happened. I treated her like a friend, smiling in the hallway, having small talk every now and then, yeah, no, the usual stuff. I asked her why she felt she didn't get treated like a friend and completely avoided the question. So it's all good now though? No it isn't. And it never will be, because Ankle has done so much shit like this to others, and I mean the exact same thing basically. She then sort of berates herself, saying things like, before bad stuff comes out of my mouth, because I make everything worse. And there's almost never a reasonable explanation. She's always the victim. But anyway, I ask her a wild bunch of questions because I'm confused, and yeah, and so she avoids some of them, and here's her response to me asking how I didn't treat her like a friend. I'm honestly not bothered to explain, I know that it's rude of her, but I'm lazy as fuck. If you really need to know, ask me in person, at least I don't have to text about it. And you know how I said that she was on a cruise? Yeah, she was on a cruise for the rest of the week. And yes, I cold talked to her the next week, but that's awkward and imby, so it's even more awkward, and I don't know how to phrase things without sounding rude or making jokes out of it, cause that's what I do. But anyway, I'm not friends with her and don't talk to her, and one of the main reasons is because she overreacted about so much and has done this before, and it's always out of nowhere and for no real reason. I know this is a massive post, but I need to vent. Fuck you, Ankle. Also, I know this text makes me out to be a shitty person, and I kind of am, but not as much as it makes out to be. Please don't be mean. Sorry, kinda long. TLDR at bottom. I was young and dumb and decided living with my best friend would be the best idea. I wasn't making a ton of money at the time and usually just had enough cover rent, but I never made her pay a cent towards my share. Her boyfriend, who we'll call Jack, lived far away, and when we moved in, I had no issue with Jack having a key and being able to come over to let her dog out, chill at the house, stay the night every once in a while, whatever. That turned into him fully moving in, but paying nothing towards our rent. I was irritated about it. After 6 months of this, I confronted her when she asked for my half of the cable bill. I told her to ask Jack for it because he hadn't contributed to our bills in the months he'd been there, and it was unfair that, in splitting the rent and bills 2 ways, I was essentially paying towards what should have been Jack's fair share. She retorted that they often showered together to save water. I explained that this in no way made a difference in the issue. I ended up staying over at a friend's place for about a week to clear my head and decide what course of action to take. The day I came home, my grandparents called me and let me know they were driving down from their home 2 hours north as we needed to have a serious conversation. When I met them, they showed me a letter my friend had sent them. It accused me of being an alcoholic, stealing their credit card info to purchase and pawn items, not paying rent on time if at all, and a list of other offenses I had never committed. I saw Ed, explained the situation to them, and they understood immediately. I went home, showed her the letter, explained she was delusional and that sifting through my room to find a letter from my grandparents to obtain their address could be seen as mail tampering, though I think that wasn't quite true, but I wanted to let her know I meant business. I went to the apartment office the very next day to sign myself off the lease and moved out about 3 days later. We haven't spoken since, though she continues to tell people that I screwed her over by never paying rent and other ridiculous things. She even went so far as to try to taint my image. When I set up a GoFundMe later in the year, I was still barely scraping by and needed assistance to afford plane tickets to attend my uncle's funeral after he passed very suddenly. She can rot, for all I care. TLDR, best friend and I live together. Her boyfriend ends up moving in too and contributing nothing towards bills by her permission. Tries to defame me to my friends and family after confronting her about it. I don't put up with that shit. I had a friend who was super outgoing, and as an introvert I had a hard time saying no to them. Usually the things she suggested were fun, and even if I was skeptical I'd have a good time most of the time. But that ended when one night she said she was invited to a coworker's party and was afraid to go alone. It was super last minute and kind of late, but I figured I wouldn't mind getting out of the house and hanging out. She picked me up after 9 PM. I don't have a car and have severe PTSD about driving. I think I'm going to die when I start driving. I don't know. It's complicated, and we headed on our way. I asked where the party was, and she said really close by, and I said cool. We start listening to music and talking, and after 15 minutes I ask if we are close. She gives a vague answer, and every few minutes I ask her where exactly we are going. I'm getting anxious, and she keeps brushing it off. She says they changed the location. At this point it's close to 10:30, and I'm really suspicious. I ask why they'd changed the location somewhere so far so late, and she again just laughs it off. I'm trapped in this stupid car on a dark road with no gas stations or stores to run to. I can't see anything out of the range of the headlights. We finally pull into a parking lot close to midnight for some apartment complexes. She laughs and says there wasn't actually a party. She met some random person online and didn't want to go alone because he asked her to bring a friend for his homeboy. I was pissed. Before I can say anything she says oh, there they are, and starts getting out. I have a bad habit of putting others before myself and trying to protect my friends from bad things happening to them. So when she gets out I get out because I'm not about to leave her alone with 2 strange men. I have pepper spray and my adrenaline is pumping. We go inside and I'm glued to her side. The guys kept trying to separate us and I kept saying no and grabbing her hand when she'd try to run off with her dude. She said she had to get her charger and jumped up and told the guy to go with her. Said she'd be right back when I started to protest and they all but ran out of the building. During the course of the 4 hours I was alone with this strange man, he proceeded to try getting me high, trying to kiss me, then talk about his brother's death in a very clumsily obvious way of garnering sympathy from me, so I'd take pity and hook up. Tell me multiple times how late it is, and how I'm probably stuck there. How I can room with him, and his brother who is asleep in the next room. Tell me his brother's really good about not interfering or watching when he hocks up in their room with him in it. I just nodded and said no thanks. When my friend comes back we are leaving. I'm not going to be stuck here, but thanks for your concern. And stay as far from him as possible. When she finally came back she was laughing, and I told her we were leaving, and she said I was being a party pooper. It was 5 AM. I hadn't slept. I was scared. I was ready to go home. The drive home was silent, and when she spoke she kept telling me not to be mad. I got home and never spoke to her again. Designer, and he's a guy that comes up with business ideas, done that work and some that don't. Obviously, for every little business he started, he wanted me to design logos / stationery / etc on the cheap, free if possible, always promising that when he hits it big he'll pay me back everything and much more. I don't really believe it, but I appreciated his friendship and was a bit of a pushover who always buckled to his constant reminders that this is what friends do. Well, eventually he does hit it somewhat big. He was relentless and hardworking. I won't take that away from him, and as you surely can expect, no, I didn't see an extra cent from him, and in fact, we didn't speak much for a while as we both were pretty busy. Later I learned that with his newfound financial success, he got a rich GF that he was constantly trying to impress / satisfy, so he had a completely extravagant wedding. I was outside the country so couldn't attend, bought a house on a rich neighborhood, and was living clearly above his means. So now that his successful enterprise is no longer enough to stay afloat, he comes up with a new business idea. His transparently worse by far, and obviously he wants me to do all kinds of designs. I, for my part, had been doing not that great and living paycheck to paycheck, and also had learned the value of my time. So when he wanted me to do everything on a token amount, I stopped him and demanded that he paid me my normal hourly rate. He beached and moaned and attempted all his best emotional manipulation, but I didn't cave. So he eventually had to agree, as he likes the way I design and doesn't want to risk hiring somebody who he doesn't know. He's also a god-awful client, indecisive, controlling, perfectionist and delusional about the value of his design input, so he likely knows that nobody else will put up with him. So for a while things worked fine. The fact that he was paying hourly also helped, kept his requests for a name changes low, though he did beach incessantly. One day, though, he says that he wants to completely change the aim of his business, so he wants to change everything. Worse, he's still under the deadline that registering his business name set him on a few days later. Even worse, he bought a bunch of machines to supply his new business ideas, so he's out of money, and also his wife is now pregnant. So he says he won't be able to pay me for the previous couple of weeks worth of work, but wants me to throw a few all-nighters on top of my day job for free. But it's okay, because when he hits it big I'll be generously repaid. Also now his usual guilt trips about friendship are complemented with guilt trips about expecting. I flat out refuse. I'm absolutely tired of his bullshit, and I know that his promises are empty. Besides, all those sudden emergencies were intentionally caused by him, so I have little sympathy. He begs, cajoles and guilt trips like crazy, but my mind is made. He never spoke to me again after that day. Later I realized that for all good reminders of what a friend is, he was never ever a friend to me, and at the moment I stopped being useful to him, he didn't see any more point to the friendship. Good riddance. In the Navy you meet people from all walks of life. Two guys in particular went with me from day one at boot camp, all the way through 2 years of a school training for our jobs, and we also happened to specialize in the same equipment. At the end of 2 and some change years of being the closest friends we had in that time period, it was coming to an end. We each had different orders all over the world. Let me back up to our backgrounds. I'm white from a diverse area. My uncle was formerly married to a black woman. My cousin is mixed. This will become important later. Friend 2 was from Arizona. He was of Mexican descent. The last one was a white Texan. He was from an all-white area. Very conservative. He was also trashy, as he took any chance he could get to cheat on his wife. Anyways, we were taking classes in my home city, so I knew our great camping site, so I figured we could have one last hurrah. We were driving to our campsite lot when we passed by a mixed race couple with a mixed kid. Without thought or hesitation, the Texan says, if it were up to me, I would take that kid behind my barn and shoot it. I slammed on the brakes, and I just sat there for a second or two. I didn't have a plan, so I looked at him, and just kind of said, my cousin is mixed, my emotions were flooding. Luckily the Mexican friend diffused the situation. I choose to make the last weekend about all we had been through. We helped each other a lot. But at the end, Sunday evening as I dropped them off, I told him that I didn't want to hear from him again unless he was going to apologize and explain why he was wrong. He just looked at the other friend and said, come on, let's get drinks. At least one of you is still my friend. The Mexican friend said, no man point, that goes for me as well. He looked angry and just walked off. I haven't heard from him since. He still has my number. It hasn't changed. That was about 10 years ago. It's a shame. My son's father and I were friends for 14 years. Dated briefly in high school, but broke up because we just didn't work as a couple. Years pass, his marriage and mine both went south. Relationships never worked out for either of us because of this or that. I'm talking to him one night and we are going to hook up. I tell him I'm not on birth control. He makes up an excuse for why he doesn't want to use condoms. We talk more, and long story short, agree to have a kid, because I've always wanted children and it just wasn't happening as far as relationships. Hard to get a family going when every guy I've dated cheated. We agreed, he promised that he'd be around. I never thought he'd fall for me and come play house with me, but I thought my closest friend would at least ask me how I was feeling, even once, while I was carrying his child. Nope. 3 months in, I found out from his parents that he had HPV and hadn't disclosed this. He'd had it at least 6 years. I had to get checked and everything came up negative, but I was pissed off. I confronted him, asking him didn't he know what that could do to a baby, or to me, if I'd contracted it? He insisted that he thought I knew he had it. He didn't. I'd asked before we slept together if he was clean, and he lied to me. He went silent for months, and then 3 weeks before our son was born, he went off at me. He had completely rewritten history in his head, accused me of trying to trap him, said I pressured him, insisted I knew things about his life I couldn't possibly know. Then he said you don't deserve this baby. That was the most hurtful thing anyone could have said to me. I spent my entire pregnancy not only alone, because the vast majority of my friends bailed on me, but tense because I've had a lot of losses. I was worried about the baby every single day, and wondering if I was going to lose him too. I had nightmares that I woke up to bloody sheets again. It was a constant fear and deep down I wondered all the time if all the miscarriages meant I really didn't deserve to have children. My son was born, and he's 3 months old now and healthy, but I knew my friendship with his father was beyond repair when he went deep down for the thing he could hurt me with the most, and used it to lash out, to cover his own bullshit. 14 years and I found out I'd never meant anything to him at all. That all the time we'd spent leaning on each other about one thing or the other, it was just sing time for him. It doesn't matter to him that he has a child at all. I know it doesn't matter because he has 4 other children he bailed on too. I just had no idea until my son was already on the way. I don't regret my son, not for a second. He's my whole world. I regret ever thinking that his father was really my friend. He doesn't have friends. He just has people he uses until they are no longer useful to him. My best friend Tim. Small backstory, my brother bullied me growing up, him 5 years older than me. Somehow we were super close because it was just us two all the time. And when my brother got out of high school, I always had Dutchy best friends because I was used to that energy around me that was normal. I was not great at picking friends because of this. Tim and I were 17 over 16. When we met in the early part of our friendship, he was a party guy, always in the center of attention and attempting to be the life of the party. He was also a huge asshole and a pure ladies man. I looked up to him just like a bro and our senses of humor and interests were the same. Tim and I were in a best friends trio. We always did dumb shit and got into trouble a lot. We went to high school parties and chased girls, all that BS stuff. Our trio was a part of a bigger group of homies. We had a little bit of notoriety around school for being bad kids, I guess. I was a virgin, I didn't do drugs, I just smoked weed on occasion. Tim and our larger group of friends started getting into a lot of partying and drugs. Also a lot of drama with girls coming between friends in the group. Dog. When I tell you girls fuck up brotherhoods, man, they do. A lot of our homies were doing Xanax and painkillers and just a lot of weed. We were too young for all that shit. Back on track here, sorry. Eventually our trio broke off because of Tim doing me wrong. Supposedly the third homie, I found out later, probably pitted me against him because that guy was a real shit show of a dude as well. Long story short, my best friend got into cocaine and was doing dumb stuff constantly. I jumped ship after that. I was coasting in college, broke as fuck, abandoned my shitty friend group. After a trash freshman year and getting fired from a sales job, I ended up getting a job at the place he worked at. I only got the job because ex-shitty friend got fired for stealing lol. Working together with Tim every day mended our old friendship. He seemed to have turned around. Short after, Tim was a full-fledged best friend. I mean, we did everything together and constantly hung out. I got a GF at the same job and we lost touch. She did not like him and I smoking weed all the time. After another year I was the bad guy there. Mayo, I was whipped as fuck. He got fired because he stole shit too, hahaha. I really sound like an idiot this far in. Anyways, after her and I broke it off, I hit him up because I needed my buddy back. I was broken hearted and weedless. We were two peas in a pod again. However, I think all the history made me cautious. I was hesitant to bring him around my new friends I made in college after abandoning our old toxic friend group because he did cause a lot of drama and BS. But hey man, this is my right hand man. Why would I exclude him? I'm not a fake pose. So I didn't. And he introduced my college friends to weed, which was no big deal until I found out one of those friends, let's call him Al, who lived in the apartment in which we hotboxed all the time, got bullied by podheads. Al was at this point a close friend of mine. Him and his roommate Wes were best friends. Without those two I probably would have been a faking cokehead too. All we do when we are together is chill and play games, and to this day, I'm 23 now, they are my main homies. They always tried to keep me out of trouble with my stupid friends, and their apartment was a safe haven when I was stressed or needed to escape this cool guy I was chasing. Needless to say, Al was anti-weed and my bestie was bringing in the weed. I mean, I was too. So we slowed down on smoking over there. Tim was disliked by my good friends and I tried to change that perspective to no avail. At some point I tried to separate the two groups and hanging out independently of one another. Tim started going over there without me and was keeping me tied to the bad habits of my past. He was there for me sometimes, and then there were times when I really needed him and he wasn't. Did I mention this guy demanded me to hang out every second of every day and would lecture me about why I didn't hang with him? I mean, to some degree I felt forced to incorporate him in everything I was doing. I kind of wanted things to go back to how they were. The two parties were having issues. Wes and Al, who were best friends, started having issues with one another, living together and such. They moved into their own separate apartments in a different complex because of the weed stuff and other BS, even though they were tight before any of this. My friend Wes had been battling depression for a long time and I think the move made him feel super alone, and he was really at his lowest. The move just wasn't good for him. It ended him up in the hospital and I started spending much more time with him than Tim. After all that transpired, Tim would argue with me when we would hang like a married couple, getting mad at me for not hanging with him as much. I was his only friend at that point. He clinged to me a lot, and I was getting really sick of it. After another texting battle of him berating me for not spending more time with him and not being the best friend I so claimed to be, he messaged me saying maybe if I wanted to kill myself, you would spend more time with me. When I read that, I froze, man. I knew that was it. I never texted him back. He tried apologizing, and I never replied. I was sitting at a buffet at a college campus with my girlfriend, staring down a long distance relationship I was about to embark on. Days before, I was by my friend's side in the hospital, and here my best friend was exploding my phone because I couldn't make time for him. Fuck that. That was one of the best decisions I have made in my adult life. I'm now 23. I'm not that cool guy I was chasing. I'm more myself than I ever have been, with two homies, Al and Wes, who will be standing next to me when I hopefully marry this woman. If I have any advice for anyone in high school or in that age range that has sheet friends that do drugs or party, fuck all that, man. Wait till college, hahaha. Keep your body pure. I mean, have some fun. Anytime you sense one of your home is maybe sour, ask yourself, do I see myself hanging with this person in 5 years? And my answer was hell nah. You are your friend's man. Thanks for reading. My former best friend, let's call him Jay, from junior high school. This guy and I were literally best friends for years. Former roommates after HS. Helped take care of his dying brother while his family was struggling with that. Like family to me. Went to visit him and his fiancée in New York City for my birthday one year. Had a blast. His fiancée left him shortly after that, and he pleaded to me to move cross country from LA since he was concerned about not being able to cover the rent. I enjoyed my time in New York City and was sick of my job on the West Coast and had some savings, so I said screw it, why not? I'll give it a shot and see how it works out. I pay half the rent/bills for about 4 months. Find a job, start really thinking about staying there for a while. One day we were watching a game at a friend's apt. He and the mutual friend of ours started arguing about who would beat the other in a fight or something. It got a little heated, but just guys talking shit mainly. Nothing more. At the end of it, he storms out and says he's taking off, slamming the door. I was watching the game while tuning most of it out, so I didn't even realize he left until the door slammed. A few minutes later, he texts me and says that he can't be friends with someone who doesn't have his back, and goes on about having treated me like family for years and just takes things to a real personal level. So I just told him I'd crash with another friend for the night until he chills out. The next day, I head back to the apt and some of his stuff is in boxes. I ask what's going on, and he tells me he's sorry for yesterday, but he's just been super stressed the last few days. He's found out recently that he had cancer and needed to move back home as his parents were going to cover his treatment. I felt terrible, and we just sat and talked for a while. Things seemed a lot better. He left a few days after that, and we kept in contact. A few months later at Thanksgiving, I end up flying home to our hometown to visit family and hoping to see him and catch up. First night I get there, I head to a local bar that a friend from HS owns and run into his ex-fiancée that was living in New York City with him. We catch up, and I end up asking if he's heard how the treatment for Jay was going and if she had talked with him recently. She laughed and asked what I was talking about. I explained everything, and she ends up telling me that the reason he left is because he got evicted from the apt, and that she was being sued by the app manager for several months of back rent since she was on the lease. It was like over $12,000 worth apparently. That's the reason he ended up having to move back home. He didn't have cancer at all. She said he was always in that bar and she saw him a few nights ago. Well, he ends up walking in the bar and sees me talking to his ex and immediately turns around and leaves. I start asking around about it, since it just seemed so surreal someone would lie about cancer, and sure enough, he was totally fine and not sick at all. Haven't talked to him since. I thought about hitting him up and going off, but I figured it's not worth the time and energy. His ex ended up introducing me to my wife about 7 years ago shortly after that night, and was actually in our wedding. Crazy how life turns out. It wasn't something a friend did, it was something I did. 10 years ago, when I was 16, I finally flew to meet up with some friends that I had known for a year. I had met one of the guys online, and the group really embraced me. For some context, I got bullied a lot in school, and it stuck with me socially to the point that I had no actual close friends, and was far from ever being a part of a group in the way they made me a part of this. It was summer, and it was amazing. By far one of the best experiences I ever had. We played games throughout a whole week, went bowling, ate too much junk food, all the good stuff. I went home feeling something I had never felt before, wanted by someone. The next winter I go to join them again through New Year's celebration. Everything is going great until I meet one of the guy's girlfriend. Let's call her Stella. There's this instant connection that sometimes happens. Most of you will probably understand what I'm talking about. We just click and smell talk, have fun, and I think nothing of it. Remember, Stella is the girlfriend of one of the guys in the friend group. The New Year's Eve goes as planned. The weather is shit, rainy and cold. Stella was wearing a dress so I borrow her my jacket because I could tell she was cold. I remember her thanking me and looking in my eyes, and right there is where this story should end. Had I known then what I know now, I would have understood the type of path I was heading down and strayed far away from it. But I was a stupid 16-year-old kid. Things never escalated past that point physically. All it ever was me putting my jacket on her. But after I returned back home, the two of us started flirting as teens do. Innocently at first, but it quickly turned sexual. Stella eventually got busted by her boyfriend, who in turn confronted me through text messages. They broke up. He discarded me completely, and any idea of ever returning to being a part of that friend group was completely gone. Looking back, this strikes me as one of the greatest regrets in my life. These friends had made me a part of their group when they didn't have to, and I messed it up. I had something I had been looking for my entire youth, and I dropped it entirely. Nothing ever happened between Stella and me. My conscience was far too weighed down by my actions to ever consider it. It is one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life, and something I still think about now and again. I like to think that it helped me grow into a guy who would never actually betray a friend like that ever again. I managed to make new, close friends, but I'll never forget this mistake, and I don't expect to ever be forgiven for it. I sure wouldn't forgive me had it been a friend of mine. If there was one thing I could say, it would be this: Jay, I'm sorry. I faked up. I hope you're well. I know no one's gonna see this, but I've been holding on to it for a few months and wanna put it out somewhere. This happened back in August of 2019. I had two best friends I had known for 10 plus years, and we all decided to be roommates and get an apartment. Soon after which, said friends started dating. The apartment was about $1,200 plus a month, which is fine if we had split it 3 ways. But he and my other best friend had a secret agreement to where she didn't pay anything. So we were both just paying $600 plus a month. But here's the thing. We got the place in about May, and I couldn't move until about August because my girlfriend fell on some really hard times. Her dad broke a bunch of bones at work, one of her dogs died, and her car kicked the bucket all in the same week. So I offered to stay in their basement for a few weeks to help out, like cleaning, mowing, dog sitting. Weeks turned into months and I didn't end up fully moving into the apartment till about July. Looked right over that. Figured we all had some shit going on. But anyway, I move all the way into the apartment about mid-July. Things start going south real quick. They had started being outright just shitty to me for some reason. Leaving messes everywhere and blaming it on me and telling me I don't clean enough. When in reality I cleaned almost everything and cared for their cat whose litter box was nearly always full. I caught on to how they were acting fairly quick, so I went to my friend and told him, hey, if I'm like crashing in on your honeymoon phase, just lem know. If you need me to, I can just find a new apartment and you guys can have the place to yourselves. Just lem know before I put my name on the lease, since you're the only one on it. And he goes pretty much just goes, nah, it's good, you don't need to find a new place. They continue to be shitty, and after weeks I genuinely had just stopped talking to them. I'd come home from work, go to my room, and go to sleep, and clean when they weren't there. And somehow they were still mad at me. Not even a whole month later, now late August, I wake up to boxes in the living room. I ask what's going on and the gist of what they said was, oh well, you told us you were leaving, so we are leaving first. Which wasn't the case at all. I asked them if I should leave, and they told me no, so I didn't. And their plan was just to sign everything over to my name and they'd take this off. So I told them I needed to make some calls. I called up my attorney, and he told me not to sign anything, since I still hadn't co-signed the lease, yet because I never had time to. I went back to my roommates and told them I wish you could have talked to me about this before just doing it, but as it stands, I'm not signing anything. So I packed my shit, gave them the next month's rent, and lived in my girlfriend's basement again until I could find a new place, since I wasn't on any lease or utilities yet at the apartment. Next day after I found out that they were moving out, my roommates and I had a blowout fight, and I just straight up told them, you'll need to watch your words very closely. I don't have to help you. You're the only one on the lease and you're trying to fuck me over with this. I'm not helping you anymore. and they tried backtracking, but at that point, I was done. In hindsight, I probably put up with a lot more of their shit than I should have, but oh well. Blocked them both after that move, haven't talked to them since. I now have a place of my own, and I'm engaged now. So that all worked out. Well, I hadn't really been enjoying myself in the friend group for a while, but they invited me out, and I didn't have people who drank and partied in my usual group, so I kept going. But one night, we were having a chill night at, let's call it Gary's house. We had played a few drinking games, everyone was drinking beer for the most part and chatting, but we had all had a little whiskey earlier, and we are feeling good. Usually Gary gets too drunk and gets belligerent, so we were glad he was just on the couch, having a good time. I was texting my ex, because we were trying to stay friends, and he was telling me about a pregnancy scare with his new girlfriend, and I was being sympathetic in text, but complaining out loud to my friend, we'll call her Melissa, next to me. Well, Gary hears this, and somehow he manages to twist this info about another woman entirely into that I had an abortion. He starts going off about how abortion is terrible, and all this other fake Christianity crap he likes to throw around, because we lived in Oklahoma and he pretended he was more pious than he was. Then he starts getting really upset, and stands and throws his hands around, working himself into a rage. So the guys kinda shuffle him into his room, to try to cool him down. Then my friends decide that, since I ruined the party by setting him off, I had to live with the consequences. So they pulled me into his room and locked me in alone with him. I thought he was going to kill me. He screamed and yelled and got in my face, going on about how his ex had had an abortion and robbed him of the chance to be a father, and how dare I end a life for my own selfishness. When he finally stopped screaming, they let me out, and I went to the garage to calm down. I was shaking and crying. Melissa and her boyfriend come in to check on me, and I asked her to take me home, because I don't want to be there anymore, and she refused. She didn't want to leave, and it was my fault for setting him off anyway. My phone was almost dead and nobody would lend me a charger, or tell me the address of where we were, so I could call a ride. I finally remembered to drop a pin to get the address, but it took almost an hour to find someone able/willing to come get me from this guy's house way out in the Botanies. It was the first time I was ever scared for my life, and then everyone blamed it on me because they had all learned to walk on eggshells around this guy and I hadn't. After a different friend picked me up and took me home, I never spoke to that group again. My best friend of 30+ years. He and I would meet up for lunch 2 or 3 days a week. I always paid. I earned more than he did and I'm single. He had a wife and 3 kids to support. The last few years lunch became therapy as he unloaded the issues he's going through with his marriage. I listened and supported. I'm divorced and have been through it, so I could relate. It got worse and worse. I suggested he see a therapist, which he eventually did. I suggested marriage counseling, which they eventually did. I never tried to tell him what to do, but did try to assuage his fears. He had never lived alone, and was petrified of doing so, that being single is actually pretty great. It's liberating, and best of all, you can be yourself. But I also suggested caution and lots of therapy, for both of them. I also gently guided him toward coming to terms with his alcoholic father, eventually getting him a book Adult Children of Alcoholics, which was a real eye-opener to him. All the support I gave and everything I suggested was echoed by his therapist. As he came more and more to terms with this, he seemed more emboldened and ready to tackle a new phase in his life. His wife, frankly, is bossy and has bullied him their entire relationship. Gave him an ultimatum to get married. He later admitted he didn't want to get married, but didn't want to be alone. Bullied him into having not 1, not 2, but 3 kids. Bullied him into taking on massive debt to send at least 2 of the kids to very expensive private colleges for dance. This went on for years. He crashed and burned once or twice, hooking up with a psychopath girl he dated in high school more than once, whose drunk husband showed up at his doorstep and frightened the family. But I listened and provided counsel as best I could, never proclaiming that I was right and backing up whatever the therapist said. And then one day he told me he was ready, was going to tell his wife he wanted out. The next day he texted me and told me that he capitulated and agreed to stay with her and put all this behind him. Apparently part of his wife's ultimatum was that he cut ties with me because I was the bad influence on him. That was 2 years ago. We haven't spoken since. I had these two friends, let's call them J and S, who I have known since 5th grade, so for about 9 years by the time this happened. As usual, I invited all my friends for my birthday barbecue about 1 month before the party. That year was extra special to me because I turned 20 and the party was also supposed to be some kind of farewell as I was moving across the country for a new job. All of my friends immediately told me they would be very happy to come to my birthday party, except for J and S. They had become very close in the last few months and even moved into a shared flat together, growing more and more apart from the rest of us. When I invited them, they couldn't tell me whether they were free that evening, but they didn't have plans either. I was kind of annoyed because I figured they were waiting for some better plans to come up. So I decided to wait and ask them again later. When I approached them again about 1 or 2 weeks before the party, I told them to either accept or cancel now, but not to leave me hanging until the last moment. They accepted and I was happy that everybody was planning on attending the barbecue. My birthday came and everybody was there, except for J and S. They didn't even call or text me last minute that they could come. They just didn't turn up without saying anything to anybody beforehand. From that moment on, our clique, about 8 people, was completely fed up with them and their behavior and broke contact with them. Even my friend A, J's best friend since primary school. Everybody knew that this was them showing us that we weren't important enough for them anymore. Not even important enough to openly tell us beforehand that they don't want to / can't come. I was so done with them, I didn't even seek confrontation, and so did nobody else. In that moment we had all realized how toxic our friendship with J and S had become over the last months, maybe even years. S texted me 2 days later that she was sorry that they forgot about the party and that it had already been too late when they realized. J apologized after 4 months. I accepted the apologies, but that was it. They already knew they had faked up. I haven't been in contact with them ever since. It's been nearly 5 years now, and we don't miss them one bit. TLDR, about 5 years ago 2 of my best friends didn't turn up for my 20th birthday / moving away party without cancelling. This led to my whole clique ending their friendship with them. I was friends with a pathological liar. For this story I'll just call her Fuckface, FF, because that's what my friend and I started referring her as when we found out her bullshit. When we were in 8th grade, she dated one of my close friends. Oh, a little into high school. When she and FF broke up, FF looked to me for support and it really seemed to have upset her, so I wanted to help. At this time, Mayo and I kind of fell off of contact because I went to a different high school than them, and both of us were so shitty at responding to each other, but it was understood we were still cool. This is important. We would be on the phone almost every night for a year until 3 to 4 AM, while she'd talk to me about her problems. And I gave into it, because she made me feel like I was the only person that could help her. She'd call me after her parents allegedly beat her when she was apparently cutting herself, and it ended up leaving me constantly paranoid of her whereabouts. She once called me while on the balcony of her home, telling me she was going to jump off when she got a new boyfriend. I tried to act scary and threaten him on multiple occasions because I wanted to scare him into treating her well. When they broke up, she told me he had been hitting her and sexually abusing her during the times we didn't speak. She told me she stabbed herself in the stomach because she felt like that was the only way out of the relationship. All of it pushed me into a long, draining spiral, and all to find out from my friend O that they were all lies. O even told me that he didn't talk to me for a while because FF had told him that I hated O for breaking up with and the following. There was never a scar on her stomach. She never stabbed herself. Her boyfriend was actually incredibly sweet and being psychologically abused by her. She had apparently told him things to make me seem scary, and O had to explain to him that none of those things were true and my threats were entirely empty and only because she manipulated me. After she broke up with D, she had gone around spreading rumors about him and he almost had to leave the school. The balcony on her house is on the first floor. There was almost no way she could have jumped off and not survived. The reason she had relied on me so much was because I was at a different high school, wasn't physically there to see visible proof of anything, so it was easier to lie. At that point, I never responded to her calls or texts ever again. She didn't know my address, so avoiding her digitally was all I had to do to push her away. She had threatened to hurt herself a few times, and though I wanted to give in, I didn't. Last time I heard, she did something wild to get her expelled when we were juniors, and she dropped off the face of the earth. But she must still be in town, since So just told me FF came into the store they work in. So that's rad. If you ever see this, Danny, I'm so sorry. I know it's been like 6 years since then, but I think about you very often, and I hope you're doing better now. On one of the personals forums, I have met this young lady. She was looking for a sperm donor who was willing to do artificial insemination. For those not into that sort of thing, it means there is no sex involved. The donor donates into a jar and walks away. This is actually pretty common for couples that cannot conceive naturally, either because the man is infertile, or they are lesbians, or a woman choosing to be a single mother. Understandably, they don't want the wife to have sex with a random person just to get pregnant. Sperm banks cost a pretty penny, so most people can't afford that and hope to find a reasonable donor. Long story short, I agreed to serve as her donor. Not my first arrangement like this. I treat it extremely seriously, I'd say professionally, but I don't charge for my help, so that sounds wrong. Why I donate is not relevant to this post. The reason for no sex is because I'd rather not risk STDs having sex with random people. However, in all previous cases, I remained almost fully anonymous and tell the recipients bare minimum, only the information they need to know to evaluate if a donor is a good fit and safe. With this young lady, somehow, I'm not even sure how, she managed to get me to talk a lot about myself over email. After literally thousands of emails and phone calls over several months, we became quite friendly. Hell, we both admitted that, if it wasn't for my being her donor, we would have both strongly considered dating each other, but a donor relationship was more important to both of us, and incompatible with a romantic relationship. I told her things about myself and my life almost nobody, and in many cases, nobody at all, knew. She did the same. I really liked her as a person, so I actually went above and beyond as far as being a donor. Usually, I make recipients travel to my location for a variety of good reasons. With her, I traveled to a location convenient to her several times, spending 3+ hours on extra commute just to save her time she could use to sleep more. Hell, I even offered to pay for hotel room for her to stay so she could stay near my location for a weekend. I supported her emotionally through personal challenges and work crises. She'd text me or call me from work a couple of times when she needed support. Her job is extremely exhausting and demanding and unforgiving. Anyway, I donated to her a couple of times. She had trouble conceiving, possibly due to high stress of her everyday life. But in general, artificial insemination is not as likely to result in conception as such. I believe the rate people usually quote is less than 20% chance in best of circumstances. Both her and me knew this going in, and it wasn't a surprise, and she has some health issues that could also affect conception. Most of those I traveled close to her to make her life easy. Last time, she said she planned to be in my area. Her best friend's home is in a town near mine, and she visits occasionally, and said she'd just meet me for donation nearby. She was planning to be in the area with her friend a whole weekend, and meet me several times throughout for a couple of donations, but couldn't promise specific schedule. But first donation was Friday afternoon. To accommodate her, I chose to take a day off on Friday, since her schedule was uncertain on that day. Also, cleared up my schedule for the weekend, sacrificing some fun activities. Also, less importantly, turned down the only sex I had a chance to have for previous 3 months in order to have fresh donation with more sperm count for her. She promised to arrive at 3 PM Friday. Driving with her friend 3 PM comes. She's still not here. Emails me that she didn't even leave yet as her friend is running late for no good reason. At this time, work calls me with some emergency stuff that must be done at 5 PM. Asked her if she could arrive by 5 PM. She says yes. I ask if she could tell her friend to hurry up. She arrives 5:30 p.m. Finally, I had to cut my work call short to go donate and deliver sperm to her. I ask when she wants to meet next. She says doesn't know. Saturday, she doesn't contact me. Sunday, doesn't contact me. I email her ask when we are meeting, she says she's not sure. Sunday evening, still nothing. Next day I email her as if she's okay. This whole donation business is a very big deal to her, and I can't believe she just ditched me. Maybe she got sick. She emails me back a day later. Says she was going to ghost me, but since I probably deserved an explanation, she was going to give me one. Her explanation was that, apparently, I lied to her when I said I was freeing up my Friday for her. She didn't bother asking details of why I asked her to be there by 5 p.m. and that I arrived with donation to meet her and looked upset. Hell, I was stressed out with work issue, and from the tone of my earlier email, she just didn't feel comfortable doing any more donations that weekend. Said some other rather mean, rude and nasty things. Said she wanted to take a break from donation for a couple of months and try to find a donor local to her. That's at least reasonable. Needless to say, I have stopped considering her a friend or wasting time communicating to her beyond perfunctory replies to her emails. I'll still donate to her if she asks. As I said, I'm basically a professional and wouldn't let a personal issue affect that. But the friendship is almost certainly 100% over, as well as my bending over backwards to make donations as easy for her as possible. I had this guy friend. Let's call him Aaron. I used to have a thing for him, but after a while I liked him as a friend and couldn't see him like that anymore. He knew, cuss I confessed, and it was awkward for a bit, but we were okay. We never brought it up, but it brought us closer. We shared a lot more, opened up a lot. I had never opened up like that with anyone. So opening up for the first time to a very close friend who validated your feelings and helped you through it was a very nice feeling. I felt cared for and understood. We had this understanding about me feeling absolutely stupid and him being smart, but he doesn't think he's smart enough. So we never talk about how smart or not smart we are, because it's sort of sensitive. One fine day, on the 27th of December, him and another friend, let's say, Luther, of mine went to the bar to help someone set something up for a performance. I texted them asking what they were doing. They told me what they were up to and Luther told me that Aaron drank. I didn't believe it because bars don't let underage people drink, I'm assuming, and Aaron doesn't drink. So I laughed it off and didn't believe it. Luther sent me videos of Aaron looking hammered, and I still didn't believe it. But he started texting me. Well, drunk texting me. That's when I believed. He kinda went on about lemons for a while. Then he started talking about me. I told him I was surprised he drank, and he started calling me names. Told me I should stop being his mom all the time. He kept telling me that I'm not as strong as I think I am, because I can't tell people I don't like that I don't like them. He told me I was too dumb for math. He was a genius in math, that anyone who isn't good in math is just plain stupid in everything else. That literally broke me. I didn't know what to say, except it's nice to know how much you value our friendship. That night I cried so bad, hoping that when I woke up, someone would tell me it's a prank. I told 2 friends about what happened. New Year's came, and I was still miserable. January 2nd school started, and when I came to school, the 2 people I told this to told me that 2 other people told him that this was all a prank. I hoped that I would be relieved, but I wasn't. I was hurt even more. I saw him telling his friends how he pranked me, just laughing and being all cocky about it. And I remember someone telling him, you may have gone too far. She actually believed you, but he pretended like he didn't hear that. I didn't speak to him for about a week. One day they had a soccer match at school. I was watching them play with some people when he came and almost sat with me. I moved away. Someone noticed and said, oh wow. Do you hate him? Wait, is this because of the prank? And I kinda lost it then. Yes, it's the prank. He was listening to me as I said all this, and so was everyone else, but I didn't care. You thought it would be funny to tell me shit like that and not tell me it's a prank. You told me thing that you knew would hurt me. You know why it hurt? Because everything you said was true. I'm stupid, and you're not. so good for you, or whatever. And I left. That day he was a little quieter than usual. And he texted me later apologizing for what he said. He said he didn't mean anything he said and that if it makes you feel any better, I tell myself I'm stupid too. Beach boy what? But in that moment an apology was all I wanted, and I got it. But I thought about this a lot, and I realized that he apologized for the wrong thing. I'm not mad he told me all that. I'm mad that you told me things that you know would hurt me and didn't bother telling me it was a prank. That's how irresponsible you are. That's how much you care. Imagine someone telling you all that made you cry every single day and didn't bother telling you it was a prank for more than a week. And I had to find out from a friend of a friend of a friend. So yeah, that's what I'm mad about. I'm mad that this idiot was an inconsiderate piece of crap. I stopped sharing. We still talk, but we are not that close anymore. I've posted this before, but here it goes. There was a Secret Santa event at our school. It was meant to promote the student store Christmas fundraiser, but you could bring in your own gifts too. If you bought something at the store, the student aides will help you package and deliver it. Anonymously, of course. All you had to do was put the first and last name of said person in voila. Your gift was sent. It is also important to note that if you package the gift yourself / it was already packaged, then no one besides you and the receiver knows what it is. To my surprise, I got a gift. It was the only one I received during the SS event. I was overjoyed. I knew immediately who sent me the gift. It was my BFF. She was one of my only friends and everyone else I either didn't talk to or were only on friendly terms, but not quite friends. To save you the details, it was a noose. Strange, but I wasn't hurt by it. I just assumed that it was someone's prank or something and dismissed it after reporting it to the dean. It didn't hurt me, but had it been someone more sensitive or someone already considering suicide, it wouldn't have been pretty. Lo and behold, I was right. It was my BFF who sent it. She was bawling, and I mean bawling in the office. Completely hysterical. Her reasoning was that her popular friends, she's quite popular as well, dared her to do. She objected at first, but was peer pressured and did it, assuming nothing bad would happen. I really felt bad for her at that moment. I felt as if I had ruined her life. Normally, bullying and such would result in an automatic expulsion, but thankfully, she had only a 2-day suspension. The real kicker starts after she comes back from school. Everyone in our grade heard the news. Some gave me empathetic looks, but most people approached me for the tea. I tried texting her during her suspension, but she never replied. Those 2 days were filled with guilt. Well, after some poking around myself, I found out from someone of her group that she has been talking crap about me. My reputation has never been good, and I was aware that she and I were in completely different leagues. However, I never imagined that she would talk so poorly of me. When I approached her on it, all she did was confirm it. She told me to stay the fuck away, and that I've always been a bitch who followed her like a damn dog. I was immensely hurt by that. And so, friendship was ruined from then on. I still regret reporting her. She is so smart and has many extracurricular activities. Perfect is a good word to describe her. But now that suspension is on her record, she might not be able to go to her dream school anymore. It's like I threw her life off the tracks. TLDR, my friend gave me a noose as an anonymous gift, and I reported her without knowing who sent it, and she was suspended, which resulted in our broken friendship. Oh, and she's been talking crap about me behind my back. There is a retired old woman who's lived at the entrance to my street since before I moved into the neighborhood. Over time, of course, I befriended her. I'd stop and talk to her whatever chance I could, and even introduced her to another elderly gentleman on the street who needed some friends. We mostly talked about her dogs. I love dogs. She raised little Pekingese ones and doted on them like they were her children. I'm not so much into small, yappy ones, but was friendly towards her furry family, and even turned a blind eye towards when she and her circle of friends would let their little dogs run around loose off leash on a daily basis in the nearby park. Not a dog park. She just never told me she was racist. It's not like they shake your hand and say, "How do you do? I'm a racist." Unfortunately, after over a decade, I discovered this because I finally got my fondest wish, a dog, from the wrong person, a black person. Among my other neighbors were a wonderfully sweet family whom I liked very much. As a divorcee they were so kind and helpful towards me, and as it just so happens they were African American. The youngest son was always coming over to help with the gardening and bike repairs etc. So much so that I took to calling him my nephew. Sadly, finally grew up and moved out, trying to make it on his own, which included getting an apartment and a puppy dog. I knew this cause still kept coming back round the neighborhood to see his friends, family and I, with his new dog. What I didn't know was, racist, old lady W didn't like our coming around anymore, because his dog was considered a pit bull breed. Oh, the horror. A young black man with a pit bull, he had to be a drug dealer, that's what she started telling everybody. I'm not making this up. To make it even worse, ours apartment complex said he couldn't keep his dog there, so I offered to take in the mixed breed pup back J, since I loved them both, and wanted to help my adopted family. Dog the boxer mix, and I got along great. He was so smart and eager to please. I loved how strong and willing he was to work, and wanted to train him to pull carts for my groceries and such. I even made him an official ESA, emotional support animal, because he was such good therapy for me, to have a companion and an engaging interest. Well, old lady W wasn't having any of that. Regardless that my dog hadn't done anything to anybody, there were zero police, animal control, or veterinary reports. She started spreading false rumors that my dog was dangerous and that he was running loose, threatening other people and pets in the neighborhood. But wait, didn't she let her dogs run loose for years? Never mind. She even weaved a funny tale to the homeowners association that my dog had attacked her pampered Pekingese, saying that she had to pull her dog from my dog's mouth. Again, with no witnesses, animal control nor vet reports to confirm this. Unfortunately, the homeowners association had to accept her racist against breeds complaint, and I was forced to remove my beloved dog. I still miss him, and I'll never forget that she did this to someone who was supposedly her longtime friend, because her racism was more important to her. With friends like these, right? Well, I have one. So I was in the summer of 4th going into 5th grade. I went up to Maine for a 3-week vacation. And sometime before that I was thinking about my sexuality. Yes, I know it was a young age. But deal with it or stop reading, and I came to the term that I was a lesbian. Not anymore, but that was when I was still finding myself. And over that time I had fell head over heels for my ex-best friend. And me, my young idiot self, asked her out in a way that I had seen in fanfics and crap. Dumb, I know. So let's just get to the cast. Me, her, HF, you will get it later, other, and still to this best friend, and my cousin. And so here's how the story went. I called her, and she picked up. Hey, can I talk to you about something serious? HF, yeah sure, what's up? If you ever liked someone, how would you ask them out? HF, why? Who do you like? Is it a? No it isn't, it's you. HF, complete silence. I kinda figured you didn't like me back. HF, yeah I'm sorry, but we can still be friends though, right? Forever and always. I hate that now, forever and always was the last thing I said to her in a genuine way. But after the 2 weeks went by I went back home. And since it was like a half-minute walk to her house, I went over with a. And here's how that went. Us 3 playing with one of the neighbor's cats. HF and stops playing with the cat and just plays some basketball. HF, I feel really awkward with you now. Yeah, I'm sorry. HF, my mom was listening to the conversation as well. Or she. Then her mom's comes out and shuts off me and her, like a true entitled parent. So another few weeks go by and we went back to school. But I thought we could continue being friends, but nope. This little bitch was homophobic. She spread all types of rumors about me and how my mind used to be hella corrupt, but put it in present tense. I went to a mental hospital the year before, and I told about 3 people, HF, and another best friend that I'm still friends with to this day. So she took what I did that past year and spread rumors of it like it had happened recently. So I was instantly devastated, pissed, betrayed, and effing depressed. But we had other issues, because it turns out that her tricks are to make friends with someone, make her seem like the ultimate friend, make said victim lose all of their other friends, then ditch them, and make their life a living hell. So I wasn't the only one she did this to. But somehow she also won school president, so that's great. But it got to such an extreme that she thought I would hurt her. She even learned how to fake cry, to make herself look like a victim and me look like the bad guy. But she got so terrified that she convinced her parents to move away, and I haven't seen her since. And hopefully never again. Okay, so I'm pulling this story straight from the high school trauma department. Please bear with me. So when I was a freshman in high school I met this girl, we'll call her Tammy, and we hit it off right away. She was 2 years ahead of me, and we were in the same theater class. All grades could be in this class. I was 14 when I met her, and she was bordering 17 due to a held back year and an early birthday. Anyway, I was one of her like 3 best friends and I did everything to make her happy. She suffered from depression and suicidal ideations. That alone was a heavy burden to bear on a 14-year-old, but I was also coming to terms with some sexual trauma I was going through at the time as well. This comes in later. So anyway, me and Tammy are close friends, and she invites me over to stay at her house soon after her 17th birthday. We are all alone, and I'm super excited, because she is one of my only friends. We get back to her place, watch some anime, and somewhere along the line the conversation gets really deep. Like I'm ready to execute myself right in front of you deep. So me being the young empathetic friend, I spend hours building back up her spirit. So after that is all said and done, we go to sleep. I, not surprisingly, can't fall asleep because I was so worried about my best friend and lied awake for hours just filled to the brim with anxiety. At around 3 in the morning I feel her wake up and turn to look at her. Tammy, I say, is everything okay? She doesn't answer me, gets on top of me, pins me down, and shoves her tongue in my mouth. Again, I'm 14. She's 17 and she also has a boyfriend at the time. She gets off of me after a minute and says, "Well, I don't feel anything romantic for you, so that's good," and goes back go sleep. I'm confused, scared, and triggered. I'm in fact biromantic, but I was struggling with my sexuality at that point and had been through some pretty nasty shit a few years prior. I forced myself to push it down and go to sleep. Fast forward 4 years, that's right. Instead of seeing any of the manipulative signals, I stayed friends with this bitch for 4 years. I'm together with my current boyfriend. We are both seniors in high school and I'm having a grand old time. I made other friends, but I still considered Tammy to be my closest. I had pushed the incident between us so far down, I feel like a part of me forgot it. Tammy knew almost everything about me, my issues with my mom, my abuse, and she even got me and my boyfriend together. For some reason though, my boyfriend will later go to explain, he could not stand Tammy. He didn't know the history, but he was insanely jealous and protective. I always told him he was being dramatic and paranoid, but he hated it when we were together. I didn't tell Tammy about my boyfriend's hatred for her though. I wanted us to all be friends. She was my go-to as well when it came to my relationship issues, and the beginning of my relationship was very rocky. So one day I had made a breakthrough in my relationship, and I was so happy I went to text her about it. She didn't reply until she got off of work, and she did mention at the beginning of the conversation that she was really tired. We banter back and forth for a while, and then the texts start to get really hot. She made a comment about jumping my bones, and when I inquired to what that meant, the floodgates opened. Text after text of her describing how she had been fantasizing about me sexually for 4 years, and how she had always been in love with me. She described vividly scenes of us having sex, and fantasizing about having sex with me while I slept next to her, and then at the end of it all begged me not to tell my boyfriend. I was speechless. I'm demisexual, and frankly almost repulsed by sex if it isn't with the person I love, and I wasn't even that close to my boyfriend at the time, and worst of all she told me not to tell him what she said. That's when I knew. That's why he hated her so much. He could see the predatory look in her eyes all these years, and didn't feel comfortable telling me, because she was my best friend. I felt sick, violated, and I didn't know what to do. Tell him and have him go ballistic, or stay quiet and disgusted. I called my current best friend and begged her for advice, and she told me what I already knew. I told him, and boy was he pissed. He was screaming and yelling, and a part of him was angry at me because I knew he hated her. We fought a little, but in the end we decided to cut her out completely. It was the first and only time I ever ghosted someone. So yeah, my best friend admired to wanting to sexually assault me. Sorry for the trauma dump. I'm the one who got friend dumped. We'd been friends since we were 14 to 15 and were 30 when this happened last year. For context, we were both big fans of acid trips, and I had been getting deeper into esoteric philosophy and magic, particularly Aleister Crowley's system, but had discussed this with him numerous times, as well as my belief in a single ultimate reality of pure consciousness, that is the real I in all of us, Advaita Vedanta. We'd talked about this during acid trips as well. Anyway, we planned for this trip a little while, but he wound up coming over a bit later than planned and mentioned running low on sleep and not having smoked weed in a couple weeks. We were normally both major stoners. We had a spread of snacks that were perfect for acid, including some red Gatorade, kinda important for later. As was our recent tradition during acid trips, we put on a David Lynch film he hadn't seen before, Lost Highway. Super intense and faked up, but he seemed fine throughout it. When it was over, we went out back to smoke a joint and look at the sky, during which time I started rambling about how everything we think of as ourselves is just an illusion, and that we are all really one being observing itself through billions of eyes. After the joint we went back inside, and he started not feeling great. He insisted that we smoke the second joint, and, not remembering that he had no tolerance for it at this point, I agreed. I, personally, have never had a bad trip and have tripped something like 15 to 16 times by this point, so the understanding that weed has a tendency with some to send a trip down nightmare road had temporarily slipped my mind, though I was aware of it in an academic sense. After the joint he starts pacing back and forth a lot, then starts getting the idea in his head that his mom was in trouble. I try to put him at ease, but he calls her multiple times at 2:30 AM and gets more nervous when she doesn't answer. He starts complaining about noises under my floor and seems to be getting suspicious of me when I say it's just pipes. He says he needs to go outside for a bit and heads out the front door. Then I hear his car start. I jump off the couch and go stand in front of his car as he starts to pull out, shouting at him that he's in no state to drive. We sit out on my front lawn for a while talking, me trying to calm him down, but he's getting loud, and we are in a residential neighborhood. He starts desperately asking if we have more weed to smoke, and I remind him that we'd smoked both joints already, which he had a hard time believing. I try to get him to come back inside, and he gets mad at me and says he doesn't want to go in there. Then he starts walking. When it's clear he's gonna keep going, I run inside and grab his phone, thinking he was probably headed to his mom's house. I catch up with him, and things seem alright for a moment. He starts saying that he wants to go to a bar down the street. I tell him that it's 3 AM and they're closed. He insists that if he knocked on the door and yelled at them, that they'd let him be a paying customer. I'm in good standing at this bar, so I don't want him to make a scene with me as part of it, so I try to draw him in the other direction. We end up outside a Jack in the Box, where he starts arguing with the woman in the drive-thru window about getting water from them. They don't give anything to pedestrians for safety concerns, which she explained, but to no avail. As another car pulled up, I tried to explain to them the situation and asked if they could get a water for him, but he shouted that he didn't want anything I had touched. Then he starts vomiting red on the ground and freaking out thinking it was blood. I asked him if he'd had any of the Gatorade and he insisted he hadn't. He starts screaming that I had poisoned him, and one of the people in the car decides to call for an ambulance. Here I made a bad acid trip decision and decided I couldn't handle that situation any further and walked home. When I got there I found his wallet and decided to bring them back to him, but as I rounded the corner there was an ambulance there, which pulled away before I was even halfway to the Jack in the Box, so I headed back home. Of course, the red Gatorade was open with about 1/3 drunk. The next day he blocks me from all social media, and I had to find out from a mutual friend that he believed I was casting some sort of spell on him to harm him, I guess because the doctors told him he hadn't been poisoned. That's not how this sort of magic works, by the way. It's more like a spiritual means of transcending reality to understand yourself and your ideal path through life, and making sure that you can follow that path, which I had explained before many times. This was last summer, and I still have not heard one peep from him. I sometimes share memes with two of our mutual friends, but I've only seen one of them in the time since, and only once, at which point he said that for most of that group of friends I really wasn't considered a friend, and more of an acquaintance or some bullshit. Which really hurt me, since they were literally the only friends I saw on a regular basis. He said my ex-best friend has also said that he truly believes, if we met again, that I'd kill him. I've been mostly alone since then and it deeply sucks, though I have started a new relationship with a girl I've met since then, which is something at least. Kip, if you're out there, I still am willing to forgive everything and to listen to what your memory of the night is, so that I can apologize for anything that I need to do so for. I know what you went through must have been terrifying, but I never did anything with any intent of harming you. I just want my friend back. A few years ago I ended a friendship which had lasted about 7 years. We met in high school. I had just transferred in from being homeschooled and knew nobody. We'll call him Sully, and I were in the same gym class and became friends pretty quickly. I was small and nerdy, he was fat and nerdy, a pretty stereotyped friendship all around. High school saw us become very good friends. We were virtually inseparable those 4 years. We started the D&D club at our school. We both played trumpet in our school marching band. He was the best friend I've ever had. Then came college. We both stayed in town and attended a local community school. This allowed us to easily stay friends, though our time was divided by work, classes, and girlfriends. We continued playing D&D and had a pretty regular group going. One night, there was a new girl in our party. We'll call her Winter. She was pretty normal, but always rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't anything significant, but just one of those people. We all have them. The three of us spent a lot of time together playing D&D and other things. We even went on a trip to New Orleans. Winter introduced me to her boyfriend, saying we were pretty similar and the two of us hit it off right away. We did everything Sully didn't enjoy that I did, like hunting, fishing, and camping. This all continued for about a year, until the night I found out Sully and Winter were sleeping with each other. I was out with a friend, Laura, at a bar when and they walk. They hadn't seen us, so I was going to ask them to sit with us. As I was getting up, they started making out. I walked over, mouth like a trout, and stammered a hello. They looked up at me, their guilt plainly evident. I sat down, and they explained that for the past 9 months they had been faking each other after D&D, and any other time they got the chance. By the time they finished, and were shamelessly discussing what to order, Laura had joined us, and I, making no attempt to lower my voice or mask my anger, told her everything I knew. Laura knew Winter and her boyfriend. She was just as shocked as I was. We paid for our drinks and meals and left. We walked around our small city discussing what to do next. We both agreed Winter's boyfriend needed to be told. If we hid it from, we would be complicit. I already had plans to go fishing with him the next day, so I decided to tell him. Then I didn't sleep much that night, and eventually it was time for me to leave. Driving to his house, I knew I would probably be losing 2 friendships that day. We sat in the boat for a few hours before I gathered the courage to tell him. He was crushed. He and Winter had been dating for 3 years. I got a call from Sully while I was driving home from work the next day. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even sad. He was just confused. He didn't understand why I would tell Winter's boyfriend about them. In his opinion, what they were doing, at least what he was doing, wasn't wrong. He, in his opinion, was just the down on his luck guy, lucky enough to be getting it on the side. He was well aware Winter had a boyfriend. The 4 of us would even go bowling every Tuesday night. That phone call was one of the last times we ever really spoke. Over the course of the next month or so, I avoided him more and more until we didn't speak anymore. Winter's boyfriend and I also lost contact. I don't really know why. Perhaps he blames me in some way. That was nearly 4 years ago. Sully and I briefly spoke again. We even decided to go bowling. I thought maybe, just maybe we could be friends again. But he brought along Winter. They told me about a cruise they were taking in a few weeks. After all this time, he still doesn't think he did anything wrong. After all this time, I don't think he knows how much he hurt me. After all this time, he doesn't know how much I wish he had never met Winter. It was sort of mutual agreement, but I want to tell the story anyway. TLDR, at bottom I had just gotten out of the Navy and wasn't in a very good place mentally, crushing on this one girl, we will call her A, whom I met through my childhood best friend. She tells me a couple of times she isn't interested, which I struggle with, but want to keep the friendship regardless. During this whole thing I meet an ex of my childhood best friend through the girl I was crushing on, we will call her B. Me and B start getting closer and closer, until she starts dropping hints that she's into me. I decline at first, knowing fully it's a horrible idea, but eventually I give in. To my knowledge, B and my friend haven't dated for 3 years, since high school. A lot has changed since then, so that is how I rationalize it to myself. Well, a few months into the relationship she tells me that they actually tried dating again about a year ago. It only lasted 2 weeks, so again I dismiss it. You can probably tell where this is going. Few weeks later she tells me that they had been having sex up to about 2 months before we started dating. She was his booty call of sorts both between and during his many relationships. There was also a pregnancy and a miscarriage. This was the first time I paused. I really didn't like this, but I also was really invested in the relationship. In perfect hindsight I should have left or addressed the issue here, but the story continues. But I rationalize this to myself. People can have casual sex, no big deal. I don't really mind. So at this point we were thinking of telling my friend we were dating, so I wanted to start bringing everybody back into harmony. He was my best friend, she was my girlfriend. I wanted everybody to get along. So I suggested they meet up and talk about their past. I ask if she wants me there, and she says no. Again, the warning alarms are ringing, but I'll let it slide. She tells me things went well. All good. Thanksgiving rolls around, and my friend is hosting a Friendsgiving. Sweet. He just broke up with his girlfriend recently as well. We go to the party and she and he run off to talk at some point. She comes back and tells me she told him we were dating and that he gives us his best wishes. About 2 weeks later he gets back together with his last ex. Winter break comes around and B, A, and I are planning to go visit my sister over break. We are all excited and head down. One night me and B are up late and she starts to break down and tells me that she cheated on me with my friend. During their talk she got emotionally overwhelmed and started drinking. They were sitting in the car and she told him that she found someone that made her very happy and that if he follows her into her house she won't be able to stop herself from having sex with him. He follows her into the house. Here I'm far from home just trying to enjoy time with my family and this gets dumped on me. Again I'll let this slide. She was very abused all her life and used alcohol and sex as a crutch, something we were working on, and he didn't know we were dating yet. I also need to reinforce that I was dealing with some mental stuff and she really helped me with that. Plus the trip still had a few days left and I just wanted to hang with my sister. We get back and things are calm for a bit until my friend breaks up with his girlfriend. He starts sending me and B a lot of cryptic texts. Until one day, while me and B are in a Walmart parking lot, he texts us that he was planning on purposing to be during Friendsgiving before she told him we were dating. She breaks down immediately and says to herself that she would have said yes. This is when my world collapsed. A few weeks of a very messy breakup and me finally snapping at my friend, calling him out for all the pain he causes and cheaty stuff he does. Eventually getting the courage to go no contact with B and begin my journey of true healing and discovery. 4 months pass and I eventually apologize to both B and my friend. I was not proud of the way I acted during the breakup. Was I justified? Absolutely. But that is not my way or my nature. B responses generically while my friend doesn't. Another few months pass and my friend wants to talk. So he comes over and we talk for about 4 hours. Not really about what happened, but just kinda catching up. During this point I had just found philosophy and was rediscovering my life. If you have read Plato's Cave, I had just seen the sun for the first time. I was a bit off my rocker, but in a good way. I tell him I pity him, and he really didn't like that. So we both decide to go our mutual ways. We both had grown in opposite directions. My family and his are good friends, so we tried to keep the drama down to a minimum. His parents were actually on my side during this whole ideal and I love them to death. This is a long convoluted story, but it ended up being one of the best things to ever happen to me. It was the kick in the ass I needed to get my mental health in check and start living life the way I want to. I found philosophy, self-love, and self-care, and began the long journey of self-discovery. I have made amazing new friends with whom I absolutely love, and most days I'm ecstatic just to be alive. As far as I know they are still dating about a year later, and if you are reading this know that you two are still very special to me, and I hope that you are your way to healing and happiness, as I have. Thank you for what you did to me. It made me into a better person. TLDR, dated friend's ex got cheated on and broken up with. Best thing to ever happen to me. 8 so little long story. About 6ish years ago, I'm currently 17. I met a guy through scouts. Let's call him Dennis. Dennis was a cool dude at the time. Laid back but had a bit of stature on him. All well and good, but some of the better friends I have from the time teased him a bit here and there but nothing too major. Later in time though, Dennis started to change. I couldn't really ever avoid him, because being in the same school and scouts and sports, he was always there. He started to lose his cool more often, getting into a yelling state from time to time, and it only got worse after that. A year went by, and Dennis had gotten very bad with his temper. And the turnies, that he started to target me. I have my own theories, like if he was jealous of something, but I'll never know. Dennis would constantly be assertive, and would only get more angry, because people wouldn't listen to him, but when I opened up they listened to me. Thereon, if there was something I messed up with, that he was running he'd scream at me. One time in particular, I was moving the flags at one end of the pool, at our school pool, during a girls' swim meet, because we were managers, and he addressed me saying move it faster, you cunt. There was other shit like that, but at this point it wasn't just him, it was his family too. The father would treat me as if I was mentally disabled and couldn't lead. The mother tried to turn all the adults in our Boy Scout troop against my family because I did a private invitation for my Eagle project, and he would try and tear me down. I broke one day where I was fuming to the point where I genuinely considered harming him, but after an hour-long shower I folded and said that I wouldn't stoop down to his level. From then, I cut him out of my life, having as little contact necessary. If he tries to start shit with me once, I'm gonna lay it into him and his arrogant self, full fisticuffs. Just because he's good at swim and might go to states isn't a good reason to actively try to ruin anyone's, my life. TLDR, a head as I've known for a long time went from cool to a massive beach, trying to ruin my life, and if he tries again his jawline is at risk. This isn't nearly as intense as most of the stories posted here, but it might be a bit cathartic to type it out and send it into the abyss of comments here. A few of my friends had been traveling down one side of the political horseshoe for the past few years. They became less tolerant of people with differing views over time. I expressed a few different times to them over the years that I see them tumbling down that path, and that I was kind of worried for them and felt like they were slowly slipping away. They weren't perfect, and the more I reflect on some of those friendships, the more I notice how rude and cheaty they were to me. It was hard to see that, because we also shared a lot of laughs and good memories as well. But they eventually became too intolerant and sanctimonious, until it got to the point where they couldn't help but storm the daylights out of people. Anything to make them feel like they were still superior to other people in some type of way. I feel like at the end of the day they used moral superiority as their vice, because it was one of the only ways they could fool themselves, because in all honesty they hadn't ever really done or accomplished much of anything, which explains pretty handily why they were always trying to tear people down. Eventually my friendship with one of them took a killing blow, not that there was much left to kill at that point. One of them had been bashing Louis the 100th point K4 master, baiting in front of people. I played the devil's advocate and tried to offer the sentiment that people are neither as good as the best thing they've ever done, nor were they as bad as the worst thing they've ever done. And I took this approach specifically because this friend of mine who was self-righteously bashing Louis the 100th point K to no end had, in the past, you guessed it, master, baited in the same room as other people. They had done this multiple times over the years, but they were the youngest of our group, so nobody really held it against them too harshly. They think that nobody ever noticed that they were doing it as we all watched television and they were covered with a blanket or sometimes just with their sweet pants on, but unfortunately some people noticed. One time in particular, they were talking a lot of shit about someone in our group of friends, and I defended that friend, again claiming that we are neither as good or bad as the best and worst things we have done. They doubled down on their stance, so as a Hail Mary attempt at not losing them completely down this rabbit hole of self-righteous insanity, I told them that I was one of the people who noticed that they used to master bait while other people were in the room, and that I don't judge them harshly for it, so why do they insist on judging other people so harshly for far less? I told them that I was arguing in favor of Louis the 100th point K that one time because I was actually trying to argue that they weren't all that bad. They argued against themselves without even knowing it, but I don't think that the theme of the entire lesson ever sunk in. So the killing blow was a long time after this last conversation had taken place. I saw them at a concert and made small talk with them. They were quiet and didn't seem at all invested. So I gave them a hug, told them I love them, and told them to take it easy and enjoy the show. Only to find out a while later from someone else that this friend of mine who had been slowly slipping away for the past few years had been talking shit about me as well at a party a while back. They even went as far as saying that they'd never even liked me. By the time I heard that, I wasn't even too hurt by it as much as I was shocked. Whatever reasons some of those friends had to dislike me, I had even more reasons to dislike them, tenfold. But I tried very hard not to lose them, and it seems like they hadn't really tried at all. It makes me feel kind of stupid for caring about them so much more than they ever cared about me when there were so many reasons to just leave them behind and move on with my life. But I'm extremely loyal to my friends by nature. Makes me feel like an idiot. But I think that caring that much about them is also a testament to how I must be a pretty swell person, and not nearly the silhouette that those lost friends have perceived me to be. We had some of the most joyous laughs during the good times, though. I hope they turn it around someday and become kind and compassionate again. Yep, I had a friend who I met while working in it for a Fortune 500 company. He was just starting as a first level network engineer. I was second level for about 2 years. Our company shifted our department to another state and we didn't want to uproot, so we were both looking for work. I got a job as a software tester and had negotiated a pretty decent price for myself. When he couldn't find work, I said I would see what I could do. A job came up. I got him in for an interview, told him what to ask for, and he got the job. The second company cut jobs, and we lost our positions. I had an issue finding work, but he found one. This time, he brought me in for a position, which wasn't as lucrative as the previous position, but still appreciated, and I took the job. 2008 hits and we were working for this financial firm. I saw the writing on the wall, and took a job with another company, making basically about the same. I had actually also brought over a different person I worked with into this new company as well. My friend got a job as a firmware engineer. We had about the same experience in firmware, and he possessed no certifications. But he started out in a 6-figure position in my time, being paid roughly 50-60k more than any other company in my town was paying for the same position. He took the job, and then another coworker we worked with at the old job got in, and then another coworker. I liked my new job, but this position seemed not only a better fit for me, but the money was too good to pass up. So I'm at his house. He has since bought a place on the lake, and I ask about any positions at the new company for myself, and the guy we worked with that came with me to my company. My friend said, yeah, there have been some positions opened up by Frankly, I don't think you and this coworker are hard workers and know as much as me, which just wasn't true, so I decided to not tell you about them. We have a really good thing going, and I don't want you to screw it up." That was instantly the end of our friendship. His business finally realized about a year later that they were overpaying for those positions and let those jobs go, replaced by lower paying positions with kids with little job experience. He has since worked in several IT jobs, including a brief stint at the head of it for a small company, before they realized he didn't have the expertise for the position. He co-owns a dog grooming service now in the middle of nowhere. Both me and the guy I work with, who moved to the other company, who weren't reliable and couldn't be trusted. My coworker took a job with another Fortune 500 company after spending 11 years working beside me. He was originally assigned to his new company as a temp backfill for their IT department. Based on his performance, they asked our company if they could directly employ him full-time as his level of service was so good. Me, the unreliable person who couldn't be trusted. I'm still with my company, almost 13 years with the same firm. I'm a subject matter expert for software, and the vendor for the software actually employs me to work as an engineer to provide professional services for their company. I've deployed to hundreds of thousands of devices, have won numerous awards, and have helped generate millions in sales for the company, while he washes pets' vacuum. Prefacing, I keep in loose contact with him, but this one really shook me, especially being white, and also that I had been this guy's best friend for well over 10 years, since we were kids. Now I don't normally address ethnicity, unless it really helps to identify someone or something, but my friend said this, and from one white person to another, it left a bad taste in my mouth and I knew he wasn't a person I wanted to be around. What happened? So basically, this friend was cheated on by the girl, who is now his one and only ex with the other male participant in question, being a black guy. Now again, mentioning skin color is normally an insignificant detail in stories because, well, let's say you had a bad customer and they're brown, black, white, whatever. Guess what? That's just an asshole you dealt with. They come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. But anyways, my friend goes off about the whole ordeal one day and said some questionable things. I'd try to quote him, but I think I'm better off giving you the gist. It was super racist. The highlight of the tirade was, "I can't stand these faking niggas taking our women. Yay. Breathe it in. Try saying it out loud." He said more, and the day went on, but by the end of it, I kept quiet and kept my distance, because that is racist, and it is toxic as fuck. And I'm sure some of you might be wondering why I didn't question his racism. Why didn't I fight back? Shame on you, peanut butter crisp. Put yourself in my shoes. Be you in a car with your best friend, listening to them scream nearly to the top of their lungs, firing off fuck and nigger left and right. Some of you might opt to speak out against it, but racism, like the deadliest cancer, does not leave a person once it's in them. Suffice to say that you can try to reason, but you are one white blood cell fighting a losing battle. Extra info, I still keep in contact with him, and we'll bounce Snapchats off of each other, but I don't hang out with him. I have my own demons to defeat, and every time I'm around his strain of negativity, it feeds the demons, gives them weapons and fire and sheet. You know, makes them harder to faking kill. Anyways, yay. Sad sheet. He's dating an East Asian girl, oh so maybe he's racist, but not like KKK racist where it's just fuck everybody. Okay, so this is a bit complicated, and I'm on mobile, so I apologize in advance that this is probably gonna be impossible to understand. I'm dating a girl. For sake of privacy, we will call her Raiz. Raiz is best friends with a girl, who we will call Sarah. Sarah is dating one of my friends, who we will call Matt. We will call the friend who ruined the friendship Hannah, who is dating a girl who we will call Kate. Hannah is also best friends with Matt, and was best friends with me, until she started dating Kate, at which point she changed, and I no longer wish to associate with her. So, Matt has several mental issues, one of which is severe anxiety. Because of this, he does not like surprises, at all. That is, when he knows about them. He's fine if it is a true surprise, but if he starts to figure out things are happening, or he is told that a surprise is coming, he gets severe anxiety and often can't even sleep. Matt also has very poor relations with his parents. All of this will be important. Hannah used to be very sweet, and we were best friends, but then she started dating Kate, and she became quite the opposite. I recently went on a trip with her to Disney, which we planned long before this change, and I was therefore obliged to go with her on. After that, I basically ghosted her. This was not the final straw, however. Now, onto the actual story. Sarah goes to a different school than everybody else involved in the story. Her school has a dance coming up, in which the girl was supposed to ask the guy. Sarah, with the help of Reese, plans a big surprise to ask Matt, and ask him to the dance. Matt gets wind that a surprise is coming, and obviously begins to freak out. A few weeks passes, and the surprise hasn't happened, and Matt has calmed down. Lo and behold, the day before this surprise, he finds out that not only was it happening the next day, but his parents were also involved. This makes him begin to freak out again, and get angry that his parents were involved. So the night goes on, he's freaking out, but as of now it's no big deal. Then, Hannah gets involved. Hannah texts me saying, "Hey, I texted Reese, and she said there's a surprise for Matt. Do you know what it is?" I'm excited for him, and that's why I'm being nosy. So, first of all, Hannah cannot keep secrets for crap, so I wouldn't tell her in the first place. Secondly though, I know for a fact that Reese did not tell her a single thing, so I text Reese to confirm this. Reese confirms that she did not tell Hannah anything. So I confront Hannah. She then gets mad and claims that I'm being an a-hole. Yatta yatta yatta. The final straw, however, was when I said, "Man, I'm glad we've stopped talking. You've changed so much," which admittedly I shouldn't have said. However, she takes this way out of line. Knowing that my family currently has some debt because we recently opened a business, she says, "Well, I'm glad you got that trip out of me, because Lord knows your broker wouldn't be seeing a vacation anytime soon." At that point, she blocked me, and I blocked her back. We haven't talked since, and I've honestly been so happy without her, because she became an extremely toxic person. I know this will get buried, but I need to get this off my chest, and I hope someone reads this. I was that friend. I had been best friends with this girl since I moved to town in 6th grade. For years, we were inseparable. She always kind of picked on me, but it was in a sisterly way for the most part. I spent every day at her house after school. We had sleepovers constantly. At one point, she got a new boyfriend, and he joined in the mocking, which was not cool. Since I and our other closest friend were not fans of his, we became a bit distant. She struggled with anxiety and dropped out of school. She moved in with her boyfriend and began working the graveyard shift at a 7 to 11 in the worst part of town. We eventually rekindled our friendship for a while. I believe we were seniors. I was accepted at a top 10 university. I was excited about college in my future and thought I was just the hottest sheet. One night, she and this random guy came to stay at my parents' house for a night or two. She cheated on her boyfriend with this guy, whom I'd never met, and was now in my basement. The years of somewhat fun jokes at my expense, her dropping out of high school and moving to the ghetto, and this whole situation just blew out of me. I told her she wasn't going anywhere in life, and I was sick of her shit. I told her I was moving forward and going places, and didn't want to be held back by her drama. And, the cherry on top, I told her that she didn't deserve that boyfriend of hers, whom I'd complained about for years. She was going through a rough time, and I just slapped her in the face with arrogance. This was 10 years ago, and I can't stop thinking of her. I've tried reaching out and apologizing for being such an entitled asshole, but I've never had a response. She's with a great guy and just had a baby. I wish I could be a part of her life again and meet her son, but I guess I should let go of that hope a long time ago. I just hope she's happy and doesn't just remember me for the horrible things I said to her that one night. We had years of awesome memories, and I crushed it in less than 5 minutes. A couple years back, my M30 best friend, M22, and I were extremely close. We visited each other constantly, played games, went to the movies, and worked in the same factory. Were it not for us both having girlfriends, it would have appeared that we were in the relationship. Time goes on, and I begin to learn some things about my buddy's GF. She doesn't hold a job, she claims to have a bunch of medical problems, has no family/support system, and is legally still married. I have lunch with my buddy and give him my honest concerns. He promises me that everything I've heard is incorrect, with the exception of the marriage. However, that's supposed to be taken care of very soon. It's noteworthy as my fiance felt a bit uncomfortable having a married woman attend a future wedding. Fast forward, and I'm getting married. I immediately request my buddy to join as a groomsman. I would have honestly hid him as my best man, but already promised it to my brother. A week before the tux fittings are scheduled, he informs me that he won't be able to afford a rental fee for the tux and would have to drop out as a groomsman. I understand completely. Money isn't always the easiest thing to acquire. I reinforce that my only concern is having my best and closest friends there for my wedding. The final week leading up to the festivities was very busy. All the ducks were in a row and everything was moving along smoothly. 2 days before the wedding, I receive a small Facebook message. Hey, I'm sorry but I can't go to your wedding. No elaboration, no reasoning, no excuses, no deaths in the family, just a no. Our 5 years of close friendship built to this huge letdown. My hurt caused me to erupt in a rage. I wrote back a long hurtful reply. Words that would have been equally placed in a relationship-breaking letter. My wedding happens, and despite the absence of my now ex-best friend, I had a fantastic time. Thankfully, the joy of wedding my beautiful wife, drinking and dancing with friends, and being surrounded by loving family, kept my mind off of the hurt. Final step, Christmas. A few months later, I receive a message from the ex-friend. He has a plastic tote of Dungeons and Dragons books left at my place and would like to get them. He arrives shortly after, peers inside the tote, gives a respectable nod, reaches out his hand, and says, well, have a nice life. Up until that moment, even after my rage about the wedding, I still had hope that we'd come back to friendship. Have a nice life seems to have been the final nail. It's been a year and a half, and I wonder if I should attempt to make contact, or merely let that ship sail away. Apologies, this story wasn't likely all that juicy/exciting. Bear with me, it will be sort of long, but really messed up. Anyways, him and I had been best friends since the 1st grade. We grew up together all through the same schools and everything. Eventually during high school we added 2 more really good friends to our circle. It was great. We had a lot of good times. Anyways, I went to college in our hometown as well as did the other 2 buddies. He didn't, but we still stayed pretty close for the most part. I think I was a little hard on him because he was very smart and had potential to do great things, but just didn't have the motivation. I was always pretty outgoing, had dated a lot of women in the past, and he was kind of the one who was an introvert in our group. While we were in college he met a girl that he liked. Turns out she was 15 and he was 19, so that put a strain on us from the get-go. She was also heavily into drugs and alcohol among other things. Anyways, due to this girl, we kind of drift apart. I didn't like that he was doing hard drugs, because what good friend would? So whatever, we went a year without really talking. Come the next summer, I was at work and get a call from him. He never calls me, so I knew it was important. Turns out she had been pretty abusive and was bringing other men home while he was at work. She was in day treatment and he wanted to get moved out of their apartment before she got home. Cool. Whatever. I dropped everything I was doing, left work 3 hours early to go get him moved out. We move him back in with his parents. He thanks me up and down, and I thought that it was going to be a fresh start for him and he would get his life back on track. Mind you that he had lost 3 separate jobs that year due to her showing up and causing a scene. I helped him land a job and fixed his car that she had vandalized and thought this would be a good road for him. I think he came out and had drinks with us one time when we turned 21, and then he stopped answering my texts, deleted his Facebook, won't answer my calls, deleted me off of Steam and Box, etc. To this day I still have no idea what I did wrong. I recently pulled up next to him at a red light. He looked over, saw me and turned the corner instead of waiting for the light to go green. I know to this day he still Has a lot of drug issues, which is maybe why he won't talk to us, because he knows we wouldn't approve, but I don't know. TLDR, helped estranged friend out, and he cut all ties. Fall of 1996. We moved to a new town. I go to a new school. Starting 7th grade. I'm getting old. About 2 weeks into the start of the school year, where I know nobody, and have the social skills of, well, a fat kid from out of town who knows nobody. Sitting in the quad one day, eating my lunch, when this kid comes up, and drops down next to me. We'll call him George, cause that's his name, fuck it. George instantly starts talking about how he has to go to a NA meeting after school because he got caught smoking weed, and if he didn't go to X amount of meetings per week, him and his mother would get kicked out of the homeless shelter they were staying at. Young impressionable podhead me thinks hot sheet. I made a new friend, and so started a whirlwind friendship that led to a million faked up situations. His mom would buy us cigarettes, so my pack a day habit was cemented that year. We shoplifted from just about every store in the mall. We got chased by cops. We broke into a place or two. You know, wholesome as 13-year-old type sheet. This kid and I were always hanging out together, despite the fact that he stole from me, like a faking lot. He stole all my porno mags. He stole my first butterfly knife. He stole my weed, all the damn time, sheet bag typier stuff. Well, shortly before school had started that year, I met this dude named John. I was 12 or 13. He was like 17 or 18. We should not have been hanging out, but we did, on occasion, when I couldn't hang out with George. Once John and I were inappropriately close, George decides he doesn't want to share his friend. One day after school, George says let's go to the mall. I say nah, I'm good. I'm gonna go catch a movie with my buddy John. Georgie boy flips his goddamn sheet. No, fuck that. You're his friend, or my friend. And if you pick him, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. This is the last fist fight I ever got into. This is also the most pathetic fist fight ever got into. I make my choice, and George readies himself for battle. He clenched his fist, extended it toward me, and ran at me like he was trying to joust with his knuckles. I sidestepped him, punched him in the back of the head, and he fell down, where he started crying. He got up, screamed at me for a minute, and I literally never saw him again. He didn't show up at school, never saw him around the mall. He just completely vanished. John and I are still the absolute best of friends to this day, but I haven't thought about George in almost 20 years. Used to be friends with this one girl, D, in 4th-5th grade. D was a tiny girl who was disgusting. She would straight up pick her damn nose in class and not even wipe off her hands. It was horrible. I went over to her house every week, though. You see, D was in my Girl Scout troop. That's how we became friends. On a Wednesday, her and I were playing, and my grandma came to pick me up. She brought my sister, older than me by over 2 years, with her. So, my grandma and D's mom start talking about stuff, and my C's, I'll call her H, comes out of the car and starts playing tag with me, and DH is it, and starts running after me, and DD then says something, I can't remember what, that ends with "you demon." H didn't show it, but she was upset by that. So, she rants to me about how she didn't like D calling her a demon. I think that's when it started. I started trying to distance myself from D. I guess I thought she would be a bad influence on me because of her insulting my C's. I started seeing just how disgusting she was. She picked her nose all the time, didn't do anything to cover/clean it. She cheated in math, literally. She had a calculator in her desk. She always brought toys and random shit to school, and because of that shit, she never paid attention. I had actually been contemplating ending my friendship with her, but had never found a really good reason. One that wasn't she's so gross or people stay away from me because I'm friends with her, which they did. BC who wants to be friends with someone who's friends with the gross girl. I started distancing myself, first by not talking to her as much, then not sitting next to her at lunch. Then, I stopped going to her house to play with Legos, literally what we did every time that I can remember. Her trashy room, and she had like 7 storage bins full of Legos. That was honestly the best thing I could've done for myself. Because I left her and didn't like being lonely, I found my current group of friends. I was sitting outside of the classroom and decided to sit with the popular kids. D, A and K R were the girls, Z, S, and A were the boys. Together, they made up the class's popular group. I tried connecting with them, but found that they were toxic. They were cussing. Remember people, it was 5th grade, so cussing wasn't nearly as widespread in school as it is in middle/high schools. So, after that day, I tried sitting with the 2 class goody 2-shoes, An and Ag. They weren't my kind of people, can't imagine why. Up until 5th grade I myself had been a goody 2-shoes. So, I went to the people that I thought would be most accepting, the weirdos, K, B, A, T, and S. I fit in quite well with them. I myself was/still am a weirdo, so I stuck with them. They became my group of friends, mainly K, A, and S to this day. I have no regrets. I consider K to be my best friend, and we actually got into Algebra 1 honors this year. Turns out, we are in the same period in class. I don't know how we even got in. We are both dumb as. We call ourselves that BC. We are never able to understand what is even happening. We actually make fun of ourselves, and she commonly says that she's half of a smart person's brain, and that I'm the other half. This is because, when you separate us, we are actually super stupid, but when we work together, we are kind of smart. I keep us on task, she corrects me on what I did on problem 3, and every other problem that I do, but only BC I ask her to correct me, so I can correct my stuff and not fail. It's great. Anyway, I'm super proud of myself for cutting ties with D. That got the ball rolling, and now, I have great friends. I'm pretty smart. When I was friends with D, studying didn't exist in my life, and I'm all around a better person. So, what's the lesson? Don't call your best friend's sister a demon. T's actually very sad that this happened, and I feel really bad, but I felt it was the only course of action. I had a childhood friend with autism. He was fairly high functioning, but it was still pretty obvious. During high school everything was fine. He was super bubbly and happy. The whole neighborhood loved him, and since both his parents worked he would frequently come to my house. He was and in a way still is like a brother to me. Thing changed rapidly after we graduated and started college. I was working a part-time job and going to school like our other friends, and we just didn't have the time we usually had to spend with him. He snapped. He started stalking me and all our friends. He started making really strong advances towards all girls and would threaten them and their family when they rejected his advances. He started sending out suicide notes to us all. He would sit on our front porch at like 2 in the morning looking into our window. We held a meeting with his parents and the police were involved in several incidences regarding him. They decided to move out of our neighborhood and give him counseling and a fresh start. It doesn't stop there though. Even after moving he still sent threats to a few of the girls, making multiple accounts, so if they blocked him, he would just use another. I contacted his mom and told her that he was threatening people again, sending her pictures of the messages, and she blocked me. My parents banned him from their house, and while I keep very minimal contact with him, I can't see myself ever visiting him again. I feel really bad, because as crazy as this all seems, I know he wouldn't actually hurt anyone. He's a guy in desperate need of help. Even with me knowing this, he's done so much damage to his relationship with myself and all our friends that we're all too afraid to welcome him back into our lives fully. To this day I still occasionally get messaged by people afraid of him showing me the messages he is sending to them. We were best friends for over a decade. She had a rough life that seemed to get worse and worse. Moving from her childhood home made her feel out of place, and from there it snowballed. Parents were always out working, too busy. She had younger siblings she had to take care of in the meantime, while she was a middle school kid herself. Conservative upbringing. Favoritism, depression that was ignored, the works. I was there for her through it all. Years passed. College came and went. I struggled, and still struggle, with issues myself, and I admit I could have been there more. But I trusted our bond, and the thought that she would come to me if there was trouble. I left her alone for the most part, because she was very busy with her workload. I didn't want to get in her way, so I didn't talk to her as much as I used to. Then suddenly, she's getting married, and I'm the last to know about everything. She'd been talking to a friend again that we hadn't contacted in some years because of her shitty behavior. Best friend somehow found time in her busy schedule to hang out with new friends, people she'd scheduled time with every month for well over a year, all the while I was off to the side. She used my depression and anxiety against me, created little tests to see if I could handle being in her wedding. When I called her out on being distant, on the fact she was using me and keeping me to the side until it was convenient, she gaslit me and claimed that she was finally happy and that I was the bitter one. I was gutted. I had been there for her through breakups, a sexual assault, hospital/ward visits, a near-death experience. And here she was, finding ample time to party and hot tub and drink with other people. The last time I talked to her was the beginning of this month, when she texted me to say she hopes I wake up one day not feeling miserable. Although I wrote it in far more polite words than she deserved. In short, I told her to fuck off. I have this longtime friend, and we date back all the way back to elementary. I was 7 years old when I met him, and we have been good friends ever since. We played a lot of card games together, starting with Yu-Gi-Oh! Before moving on from that, we picked up Magic the Gathering when it exploded in popularity recently around 2014 to 2016. My friend went to university to study for his master's degree a few years back. There he met a new friend, let's call him Bob. Bob was really into Magic, but not in the standard and modern formats we had been playing. Bob introduced us to EDH, also known as Commander, which has become one of the most popular formats. We formed a regular play group and played every week or every other week as we could, but seeing as the two of them were doing their master's degrees, there were often long hiatuses, but I digress. Me and my childhood friend are in a slightly different boat from Bob. We just wanted to cool sheet and have fun with the game. Win or lose be damned. If we won and didn't have fun, then it wasn't a good game. There's no prizes aside from bragging rights, so the only thing you can hope for is have fun while you're doing it. If you're not having fun, then why are you playing? Bob is a different beast altogether. He's a competitive player. He gets mad at you for having a card in your deck that isn't synergizing well. He scolds you for including something that you found was fun, but doesn't work in your favor to win. Bob absolutely plays to win. As we progressed more and more and naturally became better players, Bob needed to step up his game in order to consistently win like he always did. This became more and more bullshit until he was making every one of his decks in the exact same way, taking 20 to 30 minutes in his turns, and having a 30-step combo which, if you did not use card decks at between step 17 and 18, you would lose the battle, and if you didn't see that you needed to do it between 17 to 18, then fuck you. He's winning and there's nothing you can do about it. Fuck you and your fun. My therapist started to notice a problem, how I would constantly complain about this guy over and over again, and finally told me you need to get rid of that guy. Say no if he asks you to play. This is not healthy, and if you are leaving there depressed or in a foul mood, it is better to not go. I started doing exactly that, but Bob kinda didn't like that. He started to become more and more pushy. Now before I begin the real story, what would you think is acceptable for contacting someone if you are inviting them out for game night? Calling them twice? Sending them a message on instant messenger? Not to this guy. He called me 6 times in 3.5 hours. Called 2 of my friends who were regulars at the group and asked them to call me. I got a call from one of them as a Bob was trying to reach you message from the other one. Then Bob came to my house. I live out of the way, so he often gave me a ride home and literally wouldn't take no for an answer. He tried to bribe me with beer. When I said no, he tried to bribe me with stronger alcohol. When I said no again, he said, well, you'll think about it and tell me yes tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, you're hard to get a hold of. I even searched for your family in the phono book, but they are not listed. This guy openly admitted to stalking me. Fuck that guy. TLDR, guy who I used to play card games with became a dread. I stopped playing because of it, and he started to stalk me and tried to bribe me to continue to play with him. I had to tell him number 4 or 5 times within 5 minutes. This will undoubtedly get lost in all the hubbub juicy stories, but it's still pretty wild. Longtime friend had always been clingy and the jealous type. I'm pretty easygoing, so I never really put up a fuss when she had to have her way. Like, whatever, we still have fun, so let's do whatever you want to do. Years go by. I'm engaged to a gentleman and planning the wedding. Her husband at the time was also in my fiance's band. That's how we met, so it made sense the couple would be in our wedding. I reused a bunch of stuff from my brother's cancelled wedding, including my sister using the bridesmaid dress she already bought, and I gave another bridesmaid my dress I already paid for, which was way more than my $99 wedding dress. My other two bridesmaids, all I asked was they use fresh bright spring colors, think citrus colors etc, and a white shawl, and to make sure it was a dress they could reuse again and not expensive. Thinking like a $50 penny dress would work. This friend, A, stressed me out trying to make our wedding into her wedding from 10 years ago. Pushed on using Disney music for major songs. Bunch of little stuff, etc. I asked her if she would be more comfortable being a guest in my wedding. That made her calm down, but she still wore a bright red dress and black shawl to my wedding. Luckily one of my other girls knew what was up and brought an extra shawl. Fast forward 2 years. I'm in a high risk pregnancy. Super stressful. I have baby early by 5 weeks, and he has major life-saving surgery. We are in NICU. My friend comes to visit after the surgery. It was so nice to finally see an adult who wasn't a medical professional. I was lonely and scared and stressed while the hubs held down the fort and took care of our older son and pets. She comes to visit and asks a quick few questions about the baby, and then goes into this huge long vent about how she cheated on her husband with this married guy they both work with. I'm shocked and stunned. I'm all for open relationships. I have some friends the poly life suits them perfect. I'm not one for cheating though. The next week she tells me she told her husband. She then gets him to agree to an open relationship. Then she finds a GF for him, I assume to ease her own guilt. Then she demands a divorce. She continues to come over the next 10 weeks to the NICU. Every time it's a few moments of what's new, and then hours of her telling me everything. Sharing videos and texts and everything. Think cringe smile. So here I am. Admittedly this was a nice brief Jerry Springer escape from real life. I'd report back to my husband and we just couldn't understand where it all came from. Being too nice to say hey this is all really gross, and I could really use the support of a friend. I dug myself into a hole. Trying to be supportive of her while sifting my own personal moral codes and dealing with ultimately my number one, my baby. Baby is repaired and we are finally home after 70 days. My baby is repaired. He is not fixed and needs ongoing maintenance. Everyone from my family to my clients at work, no one understands sometimes I need to change or cancel plans because we could be in the hospital with short to no notice. My baby has a blue spell and we end up back at the children's hospital. She wanted to make plans for that Friday. I said sure, because it'd be nice to get away for a moment. We then had a doctor app scheduled, and it happened to be at the time we planned to connect. So I messaged her and asked if we could do the next day. Her attitude changed. She got super abusive and manipulative, trying to put it all back on me. So I cut ties. I cut her on my social media. I stopped responding to her messages. My stress level since I cut her out has been seriously next to none, aside from medical health stress stuff. Another longtime friend kept having random strangers come over off the internet to hook up. At the time I was a single mother to a very young child. I had no problems with my friend having people over on the weekends when my son was at his dad's, but I did have an issue with random people coming to our shared apartment on weekdays. It would have been a different thing if it was a significant other, but the idea of strangers having access to my child really rubbed me the wrong way. He also did things like never clean or pay his share of bills on time. Stupid stuff like that. But I broke the lease after he kept having hookups over and I started missing money and stuff. It was worth my and my son's safety for sure. I've had a few people who I gave one too many chances and cut off or just slightly distanced myself from, but I had one that I knew I was done with after the one experience. She had just broke up with her boyfriend and showed up on my doorstep randomly to visit. That was fine, so we let her in and were chatting. She kept talking shit about her ex-boyfriend that seemed to be seeping into how she was treating my boyfriend. Like, we had RDSs, and he was playing his, which was fine, because he was more just hanging out, while me and her chatted, and she said, what are you doing? And he had just responded, oh, playing Pokemon, or something like that. That itself was a little off, but then she sneered and said, ugh, I thought I finally got away from that crap. To which I said something about I'm playing that game currently too, but she didn't say anything about that. Later, he told us he'd be fine if I ever wanted to go out just me and her, which, to add context, was a big deal because he had just moved from the opposite coast to live with me, so he had no one else. I thought it was sweet, but she immediately added, yeah, you better be, because you don't get a say, and I was like okay. There was shit like that the entire hour she was there, but the icing on the cake is it took me and my boyfriend a few years for us to close the distance, as we were long distance for 4 years and friends for about 8 years before that. We have known each other a long time, and this friend of mine I had only known for about a year. However, I had told her how hard it was being apart and how much I love him, and I told her all about our struggles of going and seeing each other. So she says something to him about taking her friend, and he said something about me being his girlfriend, to which she responds, well, I was here first physically, and that was a sore spot, because we would have been together so much sooner if we could have helped it, and I had told her all of that before all of this ever happened. I was kinda miffed, and the high of my friend being back in town had worn off, so I wasn't too happy. I didn't say anything, because I wasn't sure if I was just nervous about my boyfriend meeting my friends for the first time, or if she really had crossed a bunch of lines, but at that point I had checked out. I text her back when she texts me, but I'm done at this point. I know the adult thing to do is tell about it, but I have so much shit to juggle, I'd rather spend the energy on an adult that already knows about respect, because it wasn't just the last thing. She was being venomous to him since she walked in the door, and treating the one person who had been with me through everything like that. No dice. 2 things that I probably shouldn't talk about, but fuck it, it's Reddit and nobody knows who I am. I'm autistic, or whatever. My parents were conservative Christians and don't believe in mental illness or counseling. They're both psychopathic. I got recommended for doctors growing up. They refused to have me seen. I didn't really wake up until I was in my 30s. I've always done really good in school, had good jobs, even dated a few nice women, never lasted, etc. But I didn't have any emotional intelligence until my 30s. I didn't understand people at all. Hard to understand, but everything was black and white. So anyways, I was working for my father's company developing some software for them. I was skeptical working for him because we never got along. My mom tried to talk me out of it. He was explaining a process that he wanted to implement. I didn't agree at all. It was a process for a totally separate aspect of their business. It made no logical sense. It seemed like he wanted to implement something conceived by himself and was convinced since it was the best route. Well, previous to this, I had been a work control planner for the DOE and US Navy, working on nuclear reactors in both positions. I knew a thing or two about work processes. I kept telling him we should optimize the strategy for the specific application. Eventually he threw the dry erase marker he was writing with on in the conference room at my head. I immediately left the conference room. He came into my office as I was packing all my stuff to leave and told me never to behave that way again. I told him I quit. I haven't talked to him in over 6 years. That summer I went to a music festival with a couple of my siblings and my girlfriend. I was just starting to become aware of social cues and wasn't by any means a cool person to hang out with. Well, the second night of the festival my brother's girlfriend and my girlfriend's best friend asked me how much I weighed. I thought it was a weird question, but I told her. A couple of hours later my girlfriend gave me a bottle of water with a couple of sips left in it. I drank it, and as I was smoking a cigarette a few minutes later, I began to get really dizzy. I could tell I was going to be sick or pass out. I told them something was wrong, and I thought I was going to pass out, so I started walking back to the tent in a hurry. I got tunnel vision to the point where all I could see was a bit of the trail ahead, and I was getting really warm. I got back to the tent and removed all my clothes to help with the heat. I was sweating profusely. I don't remember much from there, except waking up the next day. Over the next day at the festival, pieced together through conversation and finding out one of the guys in our camp had GHB and accidentally dosed himself, sleeping the entire night like me, that they begged me because I was so socially incompetent that they weren't having fun with me and wanted me to go to sleep. So my brother, his girlfriend, my girlfriend, and my younger sister agreed to slip me some GHB so they could spend the night without me. A couple of months later I moved a few states away from my family and haven't spoken to them since. That was over 5 years ago. Best friend from 6th grade all the way up until the start of 8th grade. We did everything together, had sleepovers, played video games, watched movies and all that shit that friends did together. Buckle your seatbelts, this is gonna be a long read. She was a bit weird in a sense though. She really enjoyed role playing, like full on role playing. She had a rebellious streak a mile wide, and she was manipulative and obsessive. I'll call her Yen for now. One day, Yen, myself and another friend of ours, sweetest person on earth, I love them, were hanging out at my house during the summer while my dad was out of state, and it was just my mom, my brother and I. It was getting late, and Yen decided to draw a penis in the neighbor's driveway with chalk. I was feeling guilty because I knew it was wrong, and the friend and I tried to stop her, but she threatened to never hang out with us again if we didn't listen to her. At the time, we were easily manipulated. We were middle school girls with very little social lives. One friend goes home afterwards, and Yen and I go inside to eat pizza and play video games. It gets closer to night time, and we are out in the living room talking, going back and forth, when she speaks up about the role playing thing. It got heated, mainly verbal and rather sexual stuff like what Yen's character was gonna do to Choi's character, who I was verbally acting as, and stuff like that. It got to the point where she kept pushing it, and I wasn't very comfortable with it. I stopped her, said I was tired, and we went to bed. The next morning, at around 6 to 7 o'clock, I wake up to a knock, more like pounding on the front door. I wake up, and there's a police officer looking at me. They ask for my name, and if my parents are home, and then ask to speak with my mom. All the while, Yen is smirking behind my mom's back as we are lead out across the street, and lo and behold, my neighbor's wife is glaring daggers at me. The police officer asks what happened, why I did it, and tells me that this could go on my record for graffitiing my neighbor's driveway. I try to explain to the officer what actually happened while bawling my eyes out, as everyone in the neighborhood is looking at me as if I'm the scum of the earth, washing the penis off the driveway with a water hose, as the police officer didn't believe me. The reason? Yen denied everything and said I was the one who did it. The neighbors agreed with her because I was the one who owned the chalk and I was the one last seen with it. My mother proceeded to berate me in front of the entire neighborhood, and I was grounded for 3 months until my dad got back home from where he was out of state. Flash forward to the start of 8th grade, after about 6 more hangouts with Yen. She tells me as we are walking home that she's no longer allowed to hang out with me because I was a bad influence, I wrote pornos, and that her mother refused to let her daughter associate with a criminal. Yet, when we were in school, she would hang off my back like I was her beach. I did a lot of horrible things to try and get her to be friends with me outside of school, but eventually I gave up after she wrote a fake note saying this cute person liked me, only to laugh in my face when I told her about it. Yen single-handedly ruined my self-esteem in one summer/school year. I had a very hard time making friends and trusting other people in the years to come. I still do have a hard time, but I'm working through it. I haven't spoken to Yen since she moved away freshman year, nor do I associate with anything related to what happened. TLDR, best friend, Yen, 6th-9th grade. Forced verbal sexual role play on me, drew a penis in neighbor's driveway, had me almost arrested, told her mother lies about me, saying I wrote pornos, a criminal, a bad influence, and later on faked a note about a person liking me, only to laugh in my face, ruining my self-esteem and causing a long-running lack of trust issues with people. Yen, if you're reading this, I hope you're faking happy with yourself. You faked up big time, and I hope that one day karma will bite you in your skinny ass. I met a guy on a game I've been playing recently, and he and I really hit it off in the most platonic way possible. It was kinda cool tbh. He was in his late 20s or so, but really cool to talk to. We spent a few weeks talking regularly every day, and it was going well. He had opened up to me about some issues he has with his ex-wife. Without going into too much detail, she was a bitch and their fallout was nuclear. There was one night he messaged me about feeling like a shitty person, so I asked what had happened. He had apparently sold his ex-wife's nudes as revenge, because she tried to open cards using his name to ruin his credit. I didn't exactly blow up, but I made it clear I had a line drawn with what I considered okay revenge and just awful acts. To me, him selling her nudes crossed a line and made me feel uncomfortable with who I was considering a friend. Granted, I don't know the full scope of emotions he feels towards her, but when I think about what I would do to someone who treated me like shit, selling something like their nudes is something I'd never do. He said she did it to him in the past, so that justified his actions. He then also added that she used to be a prostitute, so he saw that as also a reason it didn't matter. His reasoning was flawed in my opinion, and I made that known. I mentioned he could have handled it legally and gotten her in a serious trouble for her actions if he handled it right, but he told me he didn't believe in snitching to police or going through legal systems. Again, another mindset I don't really agree with in most cases, especially with what she had been doing to him and their son. I felt uncomfortable talking to him, and he could tell, so he asked me to let him know if I wanted to continue being friends or not quickly to get the situation handled. I told him to just leave me be, to cool off for a bit, and headed to dinner with my other friend. By the time got done with dinner, he had removed me on the game on both of his accounts and followed through with doing so on Instagram as well, where we also talked occasionally. A day later I added him back, and he told me he apparently blew up on me for being angry and removed me before I saw the messages. He and I still talk occasionally now, a week or so after that all happened, but the friendship we had has definitely fallen down quite a few notches, and it's hard to tell if it'll ever get back to where it was before. Looking back, I do understand some of his reasoning and don't really blame him for acting the way he did, but I also don't agree with some other parts of his reasoning still. He's still angry at me, so we'll see how it all goes over time, I guess. My wife and I met another couple through a martial arts studio I used to train at in my hometown. They were our friends for about 10 years before they moved to Florida for better employment prospects. I had finally been awarded disability through the Veterans Administration for many years of loyal and honorable service that ended after I came down with Gulf War syndrome upon returning from Saudi Arabia. We were almost begged to move from NC to Florida to live with the other couple and their daughter. I was the only one not completely enthusiastic about the plan because of my mother and sister living in my hometown as well as medical doctors being all arranged, but nobody other than the other couple there. I didn't have any real reasons against it, other than it not being our home anymore, but all of our home. Despite my reluctance, move we did. That worked out pretty well for 2 years, even with foster kids thrown in as a sort of afterthought. With that idea, I was in. If we had room for storage, we have room for someone who needs a room, I reasoned. And in fact I got along well with all of the foster kids, even when one of them dipped into my change drawer without asking first. The first house we lived in was the other couple's, but we all wanted more space, and we agreed to buy using my credit and VAT benefits. All perfectly legal, ethical, and good for all concerned. A bigger place meant more work, but life is change, so why not? But after a few months of staying with 2 sets of people, all the children decided they wanted out of the home we made for them, and it seems I was the only one who didn't want them to go. Finally, the man of the other couple decided he and his wife and daughter were moving from Florida to Louisiana, and that's final. My wife and I had been given zero warning, and no say as to why, if, or when they would be leaving. He broke up with us in a series of text messages, the first to inform us they are leaving, and the others explaining why they aren't paying any of the bills due, including the last month's mortgage payment. The good thing there is that the house were in my name, so no messy ties to unbind. Almost a year later, and I haven't spoken or texted any of them since the other guy's wife and daughter drove away, except when the other guy's wife wanted to know why I had chained the gate shut rather than let her customers onto my property so they could drive off with my stuff she had sold to them without my knowledge. She wanted those gates unlocked, or she was going to contact the VAP and inform them I was abusing my benefits, and then she was going to contact all our old friends and associates in my hometown to besmirch my name. I would have nobody to lean on back there. Nice, eh? This happened recently. This all started after my 3 friends went to a convention together in another state. After getting back from the convention, the 3 of them had been talking about booking the hotel for next year. With conventions you need to book your hotel almost immediately after the con because they get booked quick. I know all the details because I was considering joining. I made it clear that I might not be able to go and let B know because she was going to book and pay while it was agreed everyone else would pay her back. A month or two later B booked the room for K, B and B's boyfriend to share. Now, around the same time K's, the ex-friend, boyfriend had just moved out of the state. K, after the room had been booked and paid for by B, said she was backing out because K wanted to move to be with her boyfriend. I thought it was stupid because they had only been dating a few months and honestly I was excited to hear she was leaving. While I have been friends with K for many years I never like her all too much. K is more than a typical attention whore and drama queen. I could tell many stories about her on that topic, but I would be typing for hours. But it is important to note that she has absolutely no emotional maturity at all. Anyway, B told K that if she couldn't find someone to fill K's place, that K would still need to pay the money for the hotel. K still needed to pay off for the con they just came back from. K did not like this and refused to pay for the hotel B just booked. She said she needed the money to move and that B was stopping her from being happy. So, she blocked B. I was pet sitting for B, which is how I found out about what K did. K told me that B was toxic and that B had been told about K moving before B had booked. I knew this was all BS because I had been included in the process even after backing out. The way K was telling her side of events did not sound like B at all, and B would have no reason to lie. I didn't say anything to K at the time. With K's birthday coming up I didn't know what to do. I wouldn't have been able to be there and support K for her birthday if what B was say and what I believed was true, so I requested that B give me evidence in the form of screenshots. My suspicion was proven. Confirmation emails showed when B had booked and it wasn't until after that K said she was backing out. I couldn't sit by knowing K had lied like that about someone who was a good friend and calling them toxic on top of that. If she had done that to B, then what else has she done? What other drama did she lie about all so she could be the victim and get that attention and sympathy? I should have ended our friendship years ago, but didn't because I knew it would start even more drama. She was also the only friend I had, and I knew that if I ended things I would have no one else. I have severe social anxiety and am only recently to the point where I, 21F, can go to the store myself. I knew that if I were alone I would have probably killed myself. I admit that was selfish of me. If I hadn't had met my boyfriend I wouldn't have had the strength and support to do what I should have done a long time ago. I called her a few days before her birthday to tell her it was over. I can honestly say that I don't miss her and I'm glad to be free of her drama. This is an old story, and maybe it's a bit passive aggressive for me to post this considering I know she stalks all of my online accounts, though I honestly could not care any less. But I'll change names, obviously, and be as vague as possible to make it clear that I want some semblance of anonymity just in case she or anyone she knows accidentally stumbles upon this comment whilst stalking me online. I was really close with this girl Carrie for about 10 years, and while we weren't close that entire time, we got to the best friend status when we figured out we were moving to the same city at the same time. We were a pretty normal friendship at first, but the thing is, we struggle a lot with mental health issues, namely depression and anxiety. Carrie was there for me for big breakups and lots of changes in my life, and I like to think I was there for her too. This is considering how far backwards I bent over to accommodate all her depression/anxiety needs, cancelling plans repeatedly, cleaning her house top to bottom, pet sitting, finding her new therapists and doctors, making sure she took her meds, making sure she didn't off herself at her worst, helping her get jobs by using my own contacts, etc. Which were all things that Carrie started relying on me for more and more as the years passed. Still, I bore it because she was my best friend. She was one of the few people I cared about more than anything, and I admit I should have probably peaced out or at least let our friendship grow a bit apart at some point, but alas, hindsight is 20/20. Anyway, at some point Carrie meets some dude, Cedric. He's some late 20s, or so he claims, dude who's poly, and into the same stuff she's into. Cool. I thought it would be good for Carrie to make new friends and even go after a cool guy considering her past luck with dating. Then I meet Cedric. He's only dating folks below the age of 17, living with 116Y/0, while all his other partners are 15 to 17. She's hardcore into him, and while I told her I ultimately supported Carrie, he seems like a piece of shit. It doesn't matter how mature those teenagers act around him. To me, guys near the age of 30 and over should not be building harems of teenagers. So, Carrie keeps hanging out with him. I won't lie, I made it very clear repeatedly, even to this dude's face, that I did not like him. She tried once or twice to get us to hang out, but each time, Cedric added more shit to the list of things I despised about him. Doesn't get tested for STDs, doesn't bathe, doesn't work, repeatedly asks for money, only seems to hang out with teenagers despite being much older than them, etc. So, I think Carrie gets the hint and stops trying to get us together. Then, she starts claiming that she hates him too. She starts telling me all these awful things about Cedric, like how he was raping and drugging a variety of people, and the only way to stop him was if she kept hanging out with him. By this point, I was tired of her bullshit and just wanted to avoid talking about him, but then she only ever wanted to talk about him and how much Carrie hated Cedric, while repeatedly hanging out with him, and then coming back and telling me more and more awful shit about him, remind me she hated him, then telling me that she was only hanging out with him to ruin him. Not gonna lie, there were points where I enjoyed her musings on how she would do X as her act of vigilante justice, but I also wasn't stupid. For someone who claimed to hate Cedric so much, Katie sure cried over him a bunch. Her schedule, wants, and needs revolved entirely around him. Was she in a bad mood? It was likely, because Cedric blew her off. Was she in a good mood? Well, Carrie and Cedric hooked up yet again, so everything is perfect now. To this point, Carrie was pretty bad with plans and making time for others before, but as she continued to hang with this dude, she got even worse. Carrie would bail on me to make plans to deal with this dude or dig for more info, but that's not what she was doing. She was just digging a huge faking hole to fill it with lies. All this time, I was still cleaning her house, pet sitting for her, driving her around, helping her find jobs, doing my best to remind her to go to therapy and take her meds, and making sure she was doing the bare minimum of eating and drinking. I'm not perfect, and I know I could have handled it better, but the last straw for me wasn't this. See, I got all the blatant lies and the lack of self-care and over-reliance on me, because I was there. I was in her same position, sans friends or consistent loved ones. But, I had brought myself, and fought with my head to get my shit together. And no, I'm not necessarily better, but I was doing what I faking could to improve my life with every passing day. But some days, I needed a friend, just to vent to or cry to. Normally, I would have been fine with this, but one bad night on my end left me in tears. I texted and called Carrie, and she was slow to responding, which is fine. But as she stopped replying at all, I started realizing what she was doing, the same thing she'd been doing this whole faking time, which was blowing me off. Maybe it was the stress of the situation, but I felt like I had just had a bunch of bricks dropped on my head. How many times had I made time, or dropped everything I was doing, because she needed me? And how often did she literally lie to me and manipulate me that whole time? I guessed she was probably out with that dude again, and it made me mad because she had been lying this whole time about him, and now she was blowing off her best friend probably for him. Now, I'm not saying Cario/owed me. Hell, I honestly don't know if she was with Cedric that night or not. She ended up telling me she was just busy, but by then, I couldn't really let go of the fact that it didn't matter if she was telling the truth now. It mattered that she had lied to me and manipulated me multiple times over the course of the years. It mattered to me that she was compelled to make problems just to cover up things that didn't matter in the end. It mattered to me that she was willing to take advantage of my time while doing the absolute bare minimum of work for our friendship, as long as she essentially had a free, unpaid nurse taking care of her. Sorry for the long story. I'm mainly irritated about it now, though I still talk about it in therapy as being something that really affected my outlook on how I behave in friendships now. Today, I have much better friends and a social life that isn't constantly ruined by emergency calls and texts about whatever self-destructive mistake she's made this hour. And I get to see my friends regularly, and I can actually trust them because they don't have some compulsory drive to manipulate and lie to everyone around them 110ths would recommend. Is this directed to my life story? BCS, it feels like it is. So here it goes. TLDR at the end. I met this friend at college, and it was the best thing that happened to me that semester. Apparently he was my junior in high school, and at that time it felt like I met a long lost friend, even when I rarely speak to him in high school. I liked his goofy character, and he likes to make stupid jokes, and even when they weren't funny to anyone else, they were to me. He also often made crude jokes saying I look ugly like a cow or something like that, and I wasn't offended. BCS, I know he was just playing around. It was weird that I wasn't offended. BCS, I'm originally a very sensitive person, but that was just how it was. But after around 4 months seeing each other every day, his words started to hurt me. His words felt like he was pointing out each of my insecurities. I'm very sensitive of the word fat pig. I'm very insecure of my body. BCS, my family kept calling me fat, even when I have normal BMI, and I grow up to hate that word very much. And averagely, I'm considered very short. One day we were walking around and saw a pig, and he told me we look identical. I was hurt that time, but BCS, he was laughing and felt like it was a joke. I'll let him be. But when we get home I told him what I felt. That I was offended, and please don't look down on me like that anymore. I was fine with everything else, just that word was sensitive to me, and he said okay. But even after I told him, he kept repeating the same joke. The only one I told him not to say. I was serious, and I meant it, but he didn't care. But I kept on being his friend. BCS, he was still there for me all this time. We live in the same building, so I spent most evenings in his apartment. We discussed and argued and exchanged opinions about a lot of stuff, and I liked it. I was finally not living alone. He also always looked down on my music taste. BCS, I don't like Rihanna or Codaline. At the end of the semester, we took a plane back home together, since our hometown is also the same. At the airport we had some arguments and he disagreed with me like always. But at the end he said, honestly, I don't like talking to you. You might think I'm joking, but it's a fact that I've been meaning to tell. He didn't like talking to me because of my immature thoughts. I always have a different opinion than him and it annoyed him. This really hits me so hard, like a stinging slap on my face, because to me, our conversations were my warmest comfort, and I was genuinely happy to be able to share my stories and opinions to someone other than my diary. Even if we don't always agree on a conclusion. Did he really hate all of it? Do I really have stupid opinions? I cried the whole 5-hour flight, and I hoped he didn't notice. Luckily it was a night flight, so the lights were off. On my 2-month semester break I didn't talk nor messaged him at all, and he didn't even apologized, even when he knew I was sad because of what he said. Since then it was never the same, and we don't talk anymore. How can I when the only person benefiting from this relationship was me? It felt like a one-sided platonic relationship. TLDR, broke up with a friend of 6 months because he said all the while we've been friends, he never liked our conversations. BCS, my opinions are shit. More of an acquaintance, we'll call him M, but we are in the same small friends group. Core group has been friends for 10 plus years now. M and BF are late additions. A bit of backstory is needed here. Boyfriend has his N license, new driver, can't drive more than one non-family passenger at a time, and borrows his dad's car on and off. They are co-primary operators, mainly to drive to school, but he has to ask for and earn the usage of it for anything other than that. Since he doesn't pay the insurance, he did up until he went back to school full time. Even then, he's only allowed it a few times a month. When he was paying the insurance, the car was his to use whenever. This all starts in about April last year. BF would often give friends rides places, but there was a rule. If they asked for the ride, they had to pay $5 minimum, more if the distance was farther, up front to cover the gas cost to the destination and back. If he offered to drive them, or where they wanted to go, was only a 1-block detour off his route. If he was already heading somewhere, then they didn't have to pay. Fair, right? Well, M would ask for a ride home from my place after group gatherings, and say that it was on BF's way home. It was in the area around my place, but the opposite direction of BF's. M is the south side of town, BF is north, and I lived on one of the main roads dividing the area, meaning M would need to pay for the ride home. BF told him no several times, since M didn't want to pay, but he doesn't like confrontation, so he would either leave early to avoid M asking, or just gave him the ride home. It was about 5 blocks from my place, but caused BF to have to take a different route back home, because of one-way streets in the area. M never paid for the rides. Ever. Fast forward several months. It's now November. BF is in school full time now, has been since September, so he isn't paying the insurance, and has to earn the use of the car. The car rules have changed slightly. No asking for rides, unless BF had access to the car, and had no real plans to go anywhere. And really, he would only get the car when he had plans to take me grocery shopping, or for us to go on a date, so that basically meant no more rides for anyone anymore. Unless there's an emergency, but we'd both drop everything to help a friend in need, so that wasn't even something that needed to be said. One day M messaged me asking if BF could drive us, me, BF and M, to a store about 30 minutes away, to do some odd jobs with an app I'd shown him a month prior. M is always looking for ways to make some extra cash, so I passed on what I'd found. A few things to note here. 1. BF still has his N. M knows this too. New rules regarding the car have been in place for 2 months now. No one gets to ask for rides anymore. One friend, H, is an exception due to circumstances, because BF isn't paying the car insurance, so he has limited access to the car. Everyone is aware of this. BF made sure of it. 3. I have no say over anything that happens with the car. It belongs to BF's dad. Now I admit, I went off on him. I told him to have some respect. BF isn't his taxi service, and if he wanted to know about the car, he should have messaged BF, not me. I reminded him that BF still has his N, so it would have been a no-go in the first place. He got defensive, and his counter was that BF had driven with 3 passengers before, me, M and another friend H, and that he was already offering to do it again. BF, H and I were joking about hiding H in the trunk, so we could all to go to IKEA to get H a shark plushie, and M took it seriously. BF found out about all of this a month later, and told M he owed me and BF an apology for the situation. M got defensive again, and said he would not involve himself with the group on the unfair basis of being outcasted by the 2 of us. M then told H and another friend about what happened. Both were extremely confused and asked us what the hell was going on. BF and I showed them our conversations with M, and they both agreed that M had seriously overstepped boundaries, especially since he had still not paid for any gas used, even though he knew he owed it. Based on the $5 minimum, he owes BF at least $100. BF and I said that if M didn't apologize by the new year, then we would drop the rope and cut all contact with him, which is what happened. H and our other friend still talk to M, but things are strained. M still refuses to be active in any chat BF and I are a part of, and has tried to add our friends to new ones, but they shut it down. Saw it happen. This will get hella buried, but here we go. Have 2 friends. Call him Alex and Dean. Alex has a GF named Rose. Rose wants to go to a party. Partying isn't really Alex's thing. Okay, cool. She goes to the party to hang with some other friends, and Dean is there. They end up hanging out during the party afterward, and apparently did a fair bit more than just hanging out. This little affair went on for months behind Alex's back. I don't know the specifics, don't really want to or care at this point. Fact is they were establishing an emotional relationship that went beyond just friends with benefits. Then, things start to break down between the two. Again, don't know the specifics, but according to Dean, just when he was starting to catch feelings back she freaked out and cut it off. Perhaps she realized what a sack of shit she was being. Perhaps the emotional toll of maintaining a relationship behind her boyfriend's back was getting too much, and now the guy she was dirty dancing with was actually interested. Regardless of whatever really happened between Rose and Dean, they broke it off, each apparently racked with guilt that was growing day by day. It eventually got too much for Dean. Out of the blue, he calls me up and tells me he faked up big. I ask him what he did this time. He has a track record of poor decision making, and he tells me that he was having an affair with Alex's girlfriend. I feel it important to note that he often came to me for advice. I was and still am the level-headed one among my friends. After I get over the shock of this news, I tell him I can't really talk to him about this over the phone, so let's meet somewhere instead. Says fine. See you at insert food place here in an hour. I get to the food place, and he tells me how things went down from his perspective. It's mostly irrelevant, as despite his efforts to better himself, in this case he was very much an unreliable source of info. I also got Rose's story from Alex a couple months later, not much different from his story, but paint Dean as a pushy, manipulative asshole. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. In any case I tell Dean to fess up, and tell Alex what he did. Better for him in the long run, as opposed to living with a guilty conscience. He does so. Ironically, Rose told Alex maybe a day before Dean did. Go figure. In any case, Alex cut them both out his life, understandably. I called shortly after to just make it clear that I had nothing to do with it and it just got dropped in my lap. The aftermath. I'm still friends with Dean and Alex. Didn't really know Rose that well, so she just faded out of my life. Dean spent most of his time out of town, so I don't see him that much, and I still hang with Alex on the regular. Whole thing was shitty and could have been avoided. Don't cheat, kids. It will lead to nothing but trouble and needless drama, not to mention ending relationships one way or another. Ended up getting hooked up with a dealer for pot a few years back when I was a regular smoker by my little sister's boyfriend. He was like maybe 4 years my junior. Ended up hitting it off after a few visits and chats and bowls, and became friends. For the first 2 years of our friendship he lived at his parents' house as he was fresh out of school and saving up for a place by working at their bar. As time went on I noticed he spent a lot of time drinking. Like, one time I got a half bag from him, and he told me he just woke up. So, he goes into his closet in his room, grabs the weed and a bottle of vodka, and does a shot with some chaser after rolling out of bed at the crack of noon. That was like a few months into our friendship. As time went on over the next 2 years, and we got closer, I became someone he'd talk to about issues and give him advice. During this, I talked about how he needed to cut back on drinking because health issues can arise, and that he should quit using painkillers. Also gave him advice about dealing with his parents because he was a problem child in and out of jail and they treated him as such. I told him, if you want to have a better relationship, you have to work on who you are. They are floating you right now, wholeheartedly. You're not showing them you're very gracious, you know? He agreed. A week later, I'm in some random girl's apartment where the 2 girls, their mom, and him are all faked up on pills. IDK what? And I had to spend almost an hour there as he clumsily picked up all his belongings and looked for his lost weed. The whole time swinging between crying and laughing. Took him home, told him never again for that kind of ride. A few months later he was ticketed again and put on probation. Still sold weed, OBV, but I stopped buying from him because police, and it wasn't legal in our state at the time, and he understood. After that he picked up a Xanax habit too from these 2 random kids he invited into his parents' garage on a whim when they were biking by one day shortly before a trailer his parents had was done being renovated for him to specifically live in, that he continued to hang out with when he was moved. This mostly because someone burgled their house because of him, so they wanted him to have a home, but not this. Understandable. One night, he got drunk and locked his keys in his house once, and I took him to his parents to get the spare, and his mom made him sit on the porch at midnight, locked the door, and went to get them after screaming at him. That night he said he wanted to kill that beach. I lost it, topped my car, really lit into him saying, "Motherfucker, you have a house rent free because of them. You have food, water, and heat because of them. Your sparks, power, sparks live, everything is from them. You better recognize they are doing all they can for you, or get the fuck out of my car." He started backpedaling and saying, I know, you're right." Dropped him off. Then, during the last 3 months hanging out, he had stolen a old revolver from a car, was way into PKs, nerds, benzes and drinking, always faked up. Wasn't on probation at the time, so I was buying weed from him again, mostly to talk to him because no one else but the Xanax kids would. Didn't know the gun was stolen though. The nail in the coffin is when I couldn't find any other dealer but him for a friend, and the second time my friend went to him, he had him bring him to his parents. He broke a truck window of his dad's and stole the bar keys right in front of him and ran to the car and had my coworker take him to the bar where he planned to steal money. The dad followed. My coworker faked off fast and told the dad to take his own son home when asked if he'd do it. Coworker had no faking idea what was happening somehow. I unloaded on him for that and cut all ties. Ended up seeing him again a few months later. Of course he's about to be going to jail for a year or two, but it's sober because he's constantly drug/alcohol tested. I have a habit of being too nice and forgiving, and it always bites me in the ass/gets me into faked up situations trying to help people. Like the kind of bite where you're in a drug apartment for an hour picking him up as stated earlier. That kind of bad bite. Hope he's well, but yeah, I can't change him. I tried. I just couldn't take the pressure anymore. My best friend at the time just refused to give me any space when I needed it, and if I asked to be left alone for a bit, she couldn't just leave it without some kind of interrogation. I kept explaining that it was just my mental health, that I was exhausted and needed time to myself to recharge, and she just didn't get it. Sometimes it was like she was paranoid that she had somehow upset me, even though I'd made it very clear why I actually needed space. I remember very clearly, would have been about 13ish, that I told her that I just needed the day to myself to recharge and asked if she not visit. She lived less than 5 minutes away from me and would regularly visit, especially when we had days off of school. Later, I hear someone knocking at the door, and I know it's her. I quietly approached and looked through the peephole, and I was right. I didn't answer. I was too drained to. Instead I hid in another room until she left. The next day she said she had a bone to pick with me and basically told me off, and I was pissed off at her for the next week. She also didn't understand how being poor worked. She would always want to go out bowling or to the cinema, which I often couldn't afford because I was pretty poor growing up. She would always say that she could pay for me and I could pay her back later, and every time I'd have to explain that when I say I can't afford it, it means I can't afford it, including paying back. She'd always get quiet, as if she was so offended, and I was made to feel bad for not having enough money. The final straw, which frankly took me way too long to reach, was when I just moved away to university. I has just cut contact with my relatives, and I was in an awful place emotionally and mentally. I explained as much to her, and I went on to isolate myself. She later called me out on it, and I explained that with everything going on, with me trying my damn hardest at university, and with some financial difficulty, I just didn't have the ability to meet up. She kept pushing the idea that I should have just made time for her, and couldn't explain to me how I was supposed to make up some extra time that I just didn't have. We mutually ended the friendship, and I felt such a weight off of my shoulders. I never realized just how badly the friendship impacted me. My friend since the 2nd grade, dropped the final straw on me back in October. He did 7 years in prison for a terrible violent decision he made. During that time, I spent $3,000 on phone credits to talk to him regularly. I tried to make plans with his mom to go see him, but she blew me off multiple times and I really couldn't afford to go drive 8 to 10 hours away and drop coin for a hotel, so I didn't visit him. But I always made sure I had money on the phone account when I could afford it and talked to him whenever I could. When he got out, I was in a better spot financially, so I offered to take him in, since his parents had moved out of state, and it didn't look like he'd be able to parole to where they were right away. I offered 6 months rent free until he got a steady job or moved to where his parents were. I gave him a cell plan with the expectation that it was free until he had a steady job or I couldn't afford to support him anymore, and one of his sisters gave him an old phone. He didn't take me up on the 6 months rent, and that was fine. He paroled directly to his parents' place out of state, but we got to hang out for a few days before he headed out. It was good. Over the following few months, he would talk to me about having difficult adjusting to living with his parents, getting motivated, things he wanted to do in life, all sorts of things he just needed someone to talk to about. Then he started dating his 55-year-old substance abuse and anger management therapist, the one he was seeing as part of his court-ordered therapy as a condition for his parole. He started drinking again, which was a violation of his parole, and she covered for him. Suddenly he couldn't keep a job anymore. He quit off the super cheap cell plan I had him on to go be on her plan and pay 3x as much a month so he could get a new iPhone. I was at a loss. I told him that I didn't think he was making good decisions, and after that our regular conversations dropped to him sending me YouTube music links on Discord once a month while I was at work, and eventually not even that. This past September my father died in a motorcycle accident, and my mother was seriously injured. In the days following, I got what felt like a million texts from people who knew him and people who hadn't talked to me in years, all giving me condolences and telling me to let them know if I needed anything. Now, anyone who's been there knows that's an empty promise. They want you to feel better, but they are not actually going to go out of their way for you. I was agitated and overwhelmed by the sudden outpouring of support from people who'd found out from sources not me. I only got to tell 2 people about it. Others in the news have big faking mouths. So, upset, frustrated, and trying to deal with his end-of-life affairs, I silenced my text notifications. I didn't turn them back on until the day after the funeral, which was a month later. Apparently, he texted me offering condolences, and amidst the storm of other people's texts and me deciding to ignore them, I had no idea. We weren't close anymore. We talked once or twice a year, didn't share much anymore, so I didn't even think of reaching out to him. The day after the funeral, the day I turned my notifications back on, I got a text from him telling me that I was a shit friend for not going to him for support for my loss. That I was a shit friend because I didn't reach out to talk to him more, even though he didn't reach out either. That he'd reflected on our friendship and decided that it wasn't something he wanted to continue. I responded and explained why I'd missed his text and how I thought it was bullshit that he'd say all that given that we'd been friends since forever and been through so much, and told him it was especially faked that he'd try to guilt me for not coming to him after my father's death. He basically said that's nice, but too little too late. So, I blocked him on everything. Didn't reply, didn't appeal, and honestly it's probably the best singular decision I made in the month of October 2019. It ended a 23-year friendship, but the way it ended, I don't miss it or see it as a loss. Good riddance. I was doing contract work in Afghanistan making good money. My buddy, we'll call him Loki, whom I was stationed with, calls me when I'm back home on vacation just to check in. He was in the hiring process that I helped him start and would be coming out to Afghanistan soon. I had given him a glowing recommendation to my bosses and he just needed to finish some of the paperwork and he would be out there soon. He had gotten out of the military shortly before me and was doing civilian work here and there. He married one of my other friends while we were all stationed together, and they had 2 beautiful little girls. So anyways, on this call Loki asks me if I could float him $700 until he got out to Afghanistan and he would pay me back. He needed to get some repairs done to his car and buy some food for the kids. His wife had left him, my other friend, and they had joined custody, and he was falling behind on his child support payments too. I didn't even hesitate. I knew he would be hired and making more than enough to pay me back, and he was a good buddy of mine in the military. I knew his family and didn't like the idea of him or his 2 daughters going without. So that day I Western Union some money to him. He gets it and thanks me profusely. A month goes by and I'm back in Afghanistan, expecting him to arrive any day now. I go to my boss to ask how his hiring process is coming along, or if he knew when my friend would be here. Boss tells me that Loki basically stopped contacting them and the hiring process kind of just stalled. They were waiting on some medical stuff. We have to get a special physical for our job, drug screen and a couple other things to do with finances. I contact him on Facebook and he says that he's still definitely coming out there and the problem was with his medical clearance. He needed some kind of waiver and was just waiting on that, and then he would be able to finish up all the paperwork necessary to get hired. Then he asks me for another $300. I hesitated this time and asked him what he needed the money for this time, and he said his car payment. If he didn't make a payment they were going to repose his car. So I offer to pay it directly. If he'll just give me the billing info I'd send them a check. He balks and says it's at a buy here pay here place. So I asked if he had the number for them so I could call and pay it directly. He said he would get back to me. A week goes by and I kind of forget about the situation when his ex, my other friend, messages me on FB and asks, "Have you been giving Loki money?" I said yeah, just to help out. Loki said he needed it for car repairs and to get some stuff for the girls. She says I can't get into it, but it's a bad idea to give him money. I don't know why, but I instantly thought it had to do with her leaving him and wanting full custody. Like I thought she was just trying to make sure he stayed down and couldn't get a leg up in life. She wasn't a vindictive person and she was genuinely my friend. We became better friends later. More on that. So I press her and say Loki is my friend, I really want to help him out. Plus he'll be out to Afghanistan soon and will be able to pay me back. She said he's not going to Afghanistan. When I asked her why not, she tells me he's a drug addict and has been using the money he's gotten from me and anyone else we used to work with to buy drugs and would go on benders where he couldn't be contacted for days at a time. I message him and no response. Finally I messaged some of my other buddies we were stationed with. He had hit them all up for money with almost the same verbatim shtick he used on me. Some gave him money while others didn't. Now I understand that addiction is hard to deal with. He finally messaged me like a year later and tried to reconcile, saying he was in rehab and turning his life around. He never once offered to pay me back. I told him I wish him the best, but I couldn't be his friend. By this time I had also become very close with his ex. She actually busted her as raising their daughters and at that time was working in Afghanistan to send money back to them while they stayed with her parents. She picked up all his slack and had an amazing attitude. She even offered to pay me back the money that Loki had borrowed because she hated that he used their kids for sympathy just so he could feed his addiction. I ended up introducing her to one of my other buddies in Afghanistan. This buddy introduced me to my wife, so I was repaying the favor, and they had a nice relationship that lasted for about 2 years but ended amicably. TLDR, buddy borrowed money from me with a sad story about getting food for his kids and used it to buy drugs. We lived in a hyper-religious section of rural Illinois. She was my first friend and best friend after moving there. Even back when I really believed in Christianity, I was never as intense as her or the people that lived there. Her family was also very poor, and she was the victim of a lot of abuse. I wasn't better off in the abuse department, but I did what I could and shared everything with her. A few years into our friendship, her mother got her super involved with this youth group. I also ended up attending very briefly as it was very intense and not in a good way. She fell in with this group of other girls, ranging from a few years younger than us, 11 or 12, to 19. I'm not sure about the specifics of what they told her behind my back, but the very last time I saw her was when I invited her to my house, like usual, and the group tagged along too. Everything was super uncomfortable with them rummaging through my things and whispering to each other about me while I was right in front of them, but I have that Midwesterner overly nice sheet beaten into me at this point, so I just roll with the punches and we sit down for a snack I tossed together after enduring them for a few hours. I also got myself and anyone else who asked some ice cream. In the middle of eating, one of the girls asked me if I could grab something they left upstairs on my bed and I obliged. While I was gone, someone put some kind of poison or medicine in my drink or ice cream. As soon as I got back they were all as giddy as schoolgirls and laughing about seemingly nothing. I didn't really notice anything tasting off, so I'm not sure what they put it in. They then insisted on me walking them back to their neighborhood so they could go home immediately. One of the girls accidentally on purpose dumped her drink down my front. I go upstairs to change really quickly, and my clothes are all stuffed into the hamper in my bathroom and have grape soda poured onto them. The only thing in my dresser is an Alice in Wonderland Halloween costume. I get them about halfway back, all the while they're jeering and taunting me for what I'm wearing, and I have jackass along the highway honking and doing the same when I suddenly feel extremely shaky and lightheaded and sick, and begin vomiting violently all over the side of the road. They run away laughing. I walk back another 30 to 40 minutes home while seeing stars and puking harder than I ever had in my life. At one point I even had to stop to violently sheet into someone's bush. I crawled home and laid in my bathtub puking into the toilet until my mom got home. I only told her it was food poisoning because I was 14 and didn't want to deal with her acting and me being even more violently ostracized than I already was, and after what I assumed was 2 hours it had leveled off pretty well. I never spoke to any of them again, and I spent the rest of my teen years essentially friendless and locked in my room when I didn't have to go to class. This continued until I was homeless at 18. I had a best friend a few years back. We fell out and stopped speaking twice. The first time it happened, it was my choice. The second time it happened, I suspect it was his girlfriend's choice. So, the first time, he'd gotten his first girlfriend and was over the moon. I was happy for him, but he started flaking whenever we'd make plans. We'd make plans to meet up as usual, but then he'd cancel close to when we were supposed to meet up. Once, I got really mad at him for canceling on me extremely last minute, so I called him. He sounded like he was having sex, all out of breath and hitch-a-pitched voice. I told him off to not answer the phone if they are having sex and hung up. He assured me through Facebook they weren't having sex. Finally, after weeks of not seeing him I'd had enough. I wrote him a cordial long message on Facebook where I outlined how we couldn't go on like this. I told him how happy I was he'd gotten his first girlfriend. I really was, but I couldn't go on making plans with him, only to have him cancel them last minute. The last time without even telling me. I had to call him to find out he couldn't make it, just so he could spend every waking minute he wasn't working with his girlfriend. I told him that I wished him all the luck in the world in the relationship, but if he's not going to put any effort into maintaining our friendship, then I'm gonna peace out, and to call me if he changes his mind. I may have been unkind, and added if you break up, I can't recall. Several years, possibly 2, later, at a local video game expo, think E3, only super tiny, a mutual friend grabbed my hand and dragged me over to my ex-best friend, whispering to me he'd broken up with his girlfriend. We rekindled our friendship, and I'll let bygones be bygones. We weren't as close as we used to be, but we still met up frequently. He got another girlfriend, but this one didn't get between us. She had severe mental issues and made him miserable, and eventually he broke up with her on my urging. A year or so later, he got another girlfriend. He started getting distant, but we were still talking and meeting up. One day, he invited me over to his place for dinner so he could introduce me to his girlfriend. We had DIY tacos. Over dinner, his girlfriend hit me with the following nugget: I don't understand being gay. Is one of you the woman and the other the man? I'm a gay man. I didn't even react adversely. I just smiled as best as I could and tried to explain to her as best I could that some men is more passive, some more assertive, some more effeminate, some more masculine, somewhere in between, just like with men and women. Not everyone fit any of the stereotypes, and not everyone likes to fall into a passive assertive or femme-masc paradigm. I was extremely kind, used simple words and really tried to explain it in ways she could understand. She just looked lows. Eventually, the conversation moved on to other things. When I left that night, me and my friend hugged like we always do, and I gave him a genuine smile and, disingenuously, told him that dinner was great. I had a lot of fun, and we should do it, having dinner, the three of us, again soon. He has not contacted me even once since. It's been years. Might be late but worth the share anyway. I'm male, 19. This story happened 2 years ago. I had reconnected with a childhood friend, we'll call him Steve, after we found out we're both going to summer school. This was really great, and I was happy I reconnected with him, because I really thought he was a great guy. We spent the entire summer vacation together, and became really good friends. We had a lot of mutual friends and we would hang out together. We also had a female friend who was very close to us. We'll call her Linda. She was my best friend and was like a little sister to Steve. She even lived with him for a while after some family troubles. Anyway, I had a huge crush towards her, and it was pretty obvious. After some time of us hanging out every day, I started to notice that Steve is a liar. He would lie about stupid stuff that don't really matter, like doing cool shit in the past, winning championships and flying for vacation worldwide, etc. That was definitely a red flag I didn't really look into. The last straw was when me, Steve, Linda and a few more friends hang out as usual, and Steve challenged me to an insane bong rip and said, if you succeed I'm gonna show you something you want to see. Of course my curious as hit that bong like there's no tomorrow. After completing that task, Steve pulls out his phone and shows me a selfie of Linda in the mirror, full blown nudity. I was shocked to say the least, especially because she was sitting in front of me right behind Steve's phone. I kind of dusted it off, since I promised him I wouldn't tell, but after a week I just couldn't do that to Linda. I met up with her and told her the story. She was really mad at me for not telling her right after, and she's right, but I had to think about it a little. She confronted Steve and of course he denied it all and stopped talking to me and most of my friends. For a good month he denied getting the photo and said it was sent to him, not wanting to say who sent it. After another 2 weeks or so, we already gave up because we knew it was him and already parted ways. But one day I met up with him and another friend to confront him about all the other white lies, and he decided to tell me the truth. He basically said one of my best friends took Linda's phone and was the one to get the photo. I knew he was lying, but it made me furious. He blamed my other friend because he had mental problems, and it would make sense if I hadn't known him for 10 years. We made a full-blown investigation and actually discovered it was definitely Steve, since we had a perfect timeline. It happened in a party at Steve's house. I remember at one part Linda's phone disappeared, and we searched for it for about 20 minutes and Steve wasn't seen for that entire hour. We did the math and knew it happened right at that moment. It has been almost 3 years since. Me and Steve don't talk. He still denies it all, but I'm sure deep down he's sorry, because he lost almost all of his friends and let his parents down. Linda talked to his mother about that incident. I still have one friend that talks to him. He said that Steve is sorry for all the lies and said he would never lie again, but that didn't change my feelings toward him. It hurt like hell that first week. After I saw the picture, the feeling of betrayal and disappointment were overwhelming, but thankfully I have some real friends. Thanks for reading my longer story, and if you have any question just ask, I'll do my best to answer. TLDR, my male best friend stole my other best friend's phone, female, and sent himself nude photos of her. Karma did her thing. My former friend didn't do anything wrong against me, and yet I lost him all the same, because of my beliefs. Let's call my old friend Jake. We were already friends in high school, but we really hit it off in college. Man, the parties we attended were legends. I met my wife, graduated and work in an ig company. Jake took a few more years in school and became a lawyer. We were inseparable then. We drink after work or watching games at the weekend. I even helped sort of introduce him to Katie and got them to hook up. I was his best man at his wedding and godfather to his daughter. I also got a front row seat when he started cheating. Look, I'm not a prid or a holy man, but I do believe in the sanctity of marriage. And that belief, whether it is right or wrong, cost me a friend. I was there when he first met the female cowwalker that changed his life. They were the classic frenemies at the time, as Jake described the new ballbuster in their office. At first, it was just a few mentions every now and then of the girl. Then gleeful stories of how the girl blundered in the office. As time goes by, I realize that almost every story about work has something to do with the girl. And I started warning and lecturing him when it was apparent that he already has a crush on her. He became silent about the girl when he realized that I do not approve of his infatuation, and for a while, there was no news about the girl. I thought everything was back to normal. Then he called me one day, giddy as fuck, and asked me to guess where he is. It turned out that he was out of town and in a fabulous jet away. He was officially hooking up with the girl. For the next couple of weeks and months, I lectured, ranted, warned him, and begged him not to do this to his family. Eventually, he got angry and told me off, saying it has nothing to do with me. In fairness, that was a bit true, and I felt chagrined about it. But in hindsight, I guess I'm already fighting for my friendship at the time, because I just knew I can't be friends with him if this continues. I never ratted on him, even with my wife. But I also did not cover for him. Eventually, his wife found out, and I pretended that I was shocked by what happened. He is now divorced from Katie. I did not know if he fought for custody, but his daughter stayed with her mother. Eventually, I found out that he also married the girl. Katie remarried as well, so I guess it ended with a kind-of happy ending. But me and Jake never really rekindled our friendship ever again. He tried really hard, I can give him that. We revolved around the same circle of friends, and we will inevitably see each other again at some party or something. We are always polite and civilized, but there is always this cold awkwardness that we can never bridge again. One day, he arrived at my house and invited me to a game or something. I don't really remember. I did remember I wasn't doing anything at the time and just chilling on my sofa. I could have agreed and joined him, or just invited him in. I didn't do either. When he realized I was brushing him off, he exploded. Jesus Christ man, it's been 5 years. Katie already got over it, why can't you? It's not really because I'm self-righteous, God knows I have lots of flaws myself. But I just don't like being friends with cheaters. He walked out that night and he gave up on our friendship the same way I did several years ago. When I was in maybe 6th or 7th grade, I became like best friends with this girl at my dance school. She was a really nice kid, and we got along great. Her mom had her when she was rather young, like 18 to 20, and her father wasn't in the picture, so her grandparents raised her with her mom. The problem was that her grandparents were straight up awful. This girl, I'll call her R, wanted to be an actress. Her grandma was doing everything in her power to push her to be a star. R was homeschooled, so she'd have time to make it to any auditions, shootings, anything. Her grandma was racist, homophobic, ignorant, pushy, and never ever shut up. R was a completely healthy normal weight, but her grandma took her to a modeling agency that said a girl her age needed to weigh XLBS. R and I were both pretty tall for our age, and this would have put her somewhat underweight. The grandma had R put on a diet, so R would sneak snacks at my house whenever she came over. One time, she showed me where she hid the diet pills her grandma was trying to force her to take. I was like 13, and I didn't realize how horrifying that was at the time. As she grew up, R started to change. She got more and more fake, less real smiles. She used to take me along to some acting classes and some shoots if they needed extra people / if it was a more casual thing. One day I got offered a major role in a shitty, low-budget vampire movie by the creator over faking Facebook Messenger. Totally not my thing, but Oz grandma loses her shit, calls my mom listing the most bullshit reasons not to take the role. At one point, she told my mother that playing a vampire was bad luck somehow. I had already expressed that I had no interest in acting and that I was just going along because the classes were fun, and I got cool photos taken of me wearing some hella great armor for free. I also saw it as a time to hang out with R. After that incident, things just started getting weird. I was very pale, with blonde hair and blue eyes. She started bringing this up and trying to show off how much paler she was than me and non-stop bragging about her blue eyes in front of me. I'm also super white. I'm not quite as pasty as her, and I have dark hair and brown eyes. I was so confused by our behavior. She had never been like this before. I ended up enrolling in the same online school program I was in months before her behavior changed towards me. We had a class together. During a discussion board, she started responding to my comments angrily, basically making everything a metaphor about how I had wronged her somehow. None of the posts read like her though, so I think they were all written by her grandma. I tried to respond respectfully, but eventually my mom got so pissed off by the comments that she contacted the teacher about it. He made a video he sent to me, my parents, her, and her family. He went into her comments in depth and explained how aggressive they were, and then he banned her from commenting in a discussion thread for the rest of the year. She got an automatic 0 on every one of those assignments. During the video, he said a few things that hinted at the fact that our family had sent him numerous emails just shit talking me and my family. I blocked her on all social media and never spoke to her again. That was 3 years of friendship down the drain, but more than anything I just feel bad for her. She got stuck with these insufferable, closed-minded people who cared more about fame than about her, and she turned out so bitter because of it. I was angry at her for a while, but at this point I just hope she's doing okay, and that she can succeed on her own terms. His might sound stupid compared to the other answers, but it did hurt a lot for 11-year-old me. So when I was almost 7, I came back to my home country after a 2-year trip abroad. I'd forgotten the language and I really missed the friends I had made, but I moved on. I made friends at the playground, and one of them was S. She was funny, playful and mainly, she even went out of her way to speak a different language. I was thrilled. We formed a group and I started learning my native language again. I learned that before we had gone abroad, when I was 4 or younger, we used to play together. I didn't remember any of this, but it made me happier. So I was a indoors kind of kid, and my friends had to shout to my house's balcony to bring me down. Later S had to drag me out of the newly established library. I was too much of a pushover to resist. We had lots of fun. We played stupid made-up games, got crazy about Frozen that had released then, sang all of its songs when we didn't wanna run around, caught weird bugs and more. Basically, most of the happy memories of my childhood were with S and the others. Eventually, I had to shift my house, and it was pretty hard to say goodbye. S was amazing, but she was also annoying and selfish sometimes. Maybe all kids were, so there are stuff that I definitely don't miss. A few months later, S was all set to shift house too. Then we met for the last time, in the birthday party of a friend. It had been a long while since I had seen her, but we got right back to joking around. Eventually, she started throwing stuff at me. I was laughing at first, until she started throwing harder stuff and it really started to hurt. I confronted her, and she said I had called her obese. What the fuck? We had been joking around, and I had called her obedient as always. I tried telling her that, but she didn't listen, and kept throwing stuff at me, and favoring my sister over me. I know now that I had grown fast, and she was still immature, but it still hurts a bit. I'd always been a cribbaby, I still am. So I started crying then and there, and everyone gave me weird looks. My mom told me not to make such a big deal, though I don't blame her for not getting it. Then we had to say bye, and S hugged my little sister. She didn't look at me once. It felt like my childhood was being ripped away. Now I don't think she meant it, and I get that we were all pretty immature. Her mom went through a tough time later, and S was there for her where it counted, so I respect her. If we ever meet again, I'll be friendly, and I'll expect her to be the same. I don't think we can ever get back what we had, but that's okay now. Maybe I was really annoying as a kid. I'm sure as hell I'm annoying now as well. Maybe it was a breaking point for her, or maybe she was just going through a tough time. I haven't seen her since that party, so I hope she's grown out of it, and I hope, if this happens again, I stand my ground and talk to whoever I have misunderstanding with. She fought me about men. I introduced her to a friend of mine, whom I sometimes made out with. She made out with him that night and liked him. He liked it, but as a one night thing and nothing else. I asked her if she wanted me to step off and not make out with him. She said no, but told him that he would have to choose one of us to keep up with this. I only learned this later. He didn't choose her. She told me everything was okay despite repeated attempts on my part of talking with her and letting her know I was there for her for anything. Next week or so, she makes out with a guy I was really into and she knew he was in a relationship, so I made no advances in front of me. I told myself I was upset, but she was drunk as hell, so whatever. She was in no driving condition, so I drove them in her car to his house to drop him off and then to hers. They went into the backseat and left me alone in the front while she was aggressively making out with him. Even he was overwhelmed. We dropped him off and she went to the front seat. She asked if I really liked him. I didn't want to talk as I was pissed off / upset, so I turned on the radio volume. She slapped my hand and said if I wasn't ready to talk we would ride in silence. After around 10 minutes of silence she started ranting about how I made out with the guy she liked and this was her revenge. So I could see how this felt and suffer like she did. I was crying over the wheel but silent. She kept asking me to say anything but I figured being quiet was my way of resisting her at this moment. She slapped my face while I was driving. It was a strong one because I didn't answer her. I continued ignoring her and driving to her house. She got tired and we rode in silence the rest of the way. Parked in her garage and took her out of the car up to her apartment. Opened the door, let her in, closed the door, and left while she said really? Waited for the Uber on her building's reception room. She later told me she was very drunk and didn't remember what she did. I told her everything and said I wasn't interested in keeping this friendship anymore. Never looked back. Also, sorry, this is a faking long and maybe confusing rant lol. I started a school in 2018 where we had to live at the school. There were these cabins / dorms behind the school building and we didn't get grades or had any exams or stuff. It's this kind of free year thing you can do between high school and college here in Norway. And this one was all about music. But anyway, we were 10 people living in our dorm thingy and I got super close to one of the girls. We opened up to each other super quick and if one of us were feeling bad, we would cheer up each other. The first 2 months went by and we just got closer. Watched movies together, went to town together, all that jazz. Well, 2 months in, I got to know this guy living in another dorm. He was really nice and we quickly became good friends. I started inviting him over to our dorm to hang out, which he gladly did. I was low-key crushing on him, but I had a boyfriend and I'm super loyal, so I knew nothing would come of it. But my friend started taking an interest in him, which I was all for. I was telling her to go for it, cause it seemed like he liked her too. They started dating, and all seemed fine. Until we had autumn break, and when we got back, she suddenly hated me, out of nowhere. I tried talking to her a lot, but she kept ignoring me. And if she was in the living room with the others, she made sure everyone else did too. So I was pushed away from everyone in my dorm. Great. I tried talking to my friend, but since she was dating him, I was not allowed to talk to him. And he was not allowed talking to me. She would get fucking pissed if he tried. I got isolated from Mozzie people and spent all my spare time either practicing playing my instrument or crying in my room. This went on for a month. Until she suddenly ghosted my friend, which I was honestly almost impressed by, since we all went to the same school and had lots of classes together. But she started talking to her ex again, which didn't live close me at all, and started talking about him constantly at our dorm. My friend got so down, he almost felt a depression. I couldn't stand seeing him like that, and even though WW still didn't talk much, cause he was still afraid of making her mad, I went to him and told him everything. Everything that she had said, and I didn't try to twist anything. He got really sad, but told me he would talk to her. And he did. He also mentioned me as a source, which I had agreed to, since she couldn't really get any more mad at me. They split up, and it took a couple of weeks until me and him really started talking again. But, I just wanna say, that karma is a beach. For her. Cause apparently the reason she started hating me was that she was afraid I would steal him from her. And also she was really jealous because my trumpet playing was way better than hers. But sucks for her, cause that friend is now my boyfriend and I couldn't be any happier. She still doesn't talk to me, which I couldn't care less about. She is a beach. Me and my BF is going strong with our 9 months relationship. Knew our guy for almost a year, considered him a friend. Wasn't unusual for us and a third friend to get together to do some drinking on the weekends. The one I thought I knew rather well was in his mid-40s. I was 35. No biggie, we hung out with people 25 to well mid-40s. One Friday night I show up, and he is making plans for a party with these 3 much younger looking people. A guy and 2 girls. Come to find out the guy's 19, the one girl is 18 and the other is 17. This seems to be a bad idea, but I drank with older people when I was that age. So I agree to attend, mostly to keep anyone from actually giving themselves alcohol poisoning. I'm really glad I made this decision, despite being uncomfortable. First off, when I get there are already several drinks in. There was the 3 kids, my friend, and another guy I had only met once before. I had only been there 20 minutes when the problems started. The 26-year-old guy I had only met once before kept trying to get handsy with the girls. I start running interference immediately. He continues this all, and I mean all evening, despite me telling him off about it 3 times. Including trying to feel up the 18-year-old while she is puking over the side of the back porch. As if this wasn't enough, it got worse. The 19-year-old man is passed out cold. I'm helping the 18-year-old to keep hands away from her, and now the 17-year-old has drank too much. She kneels down in the backyard and says she is dizzy. My friend goes over to check on her, which I didn't think much of at first, until I look over and he is pulling her back against him and kissing her neck. He is 45. This girl is 17, still a child. I immediately yell for him to back off, and when he doesn't move right away I walk over and jerk him back from her. I try to remind his drunk stupid brain how young she is and how drunk. He accuses me of cock blocking him. The other guy is once again getting handsy. I decide it is time for us ladies to get the fuck out of there. I start herding the girls. While trying to get the girls out the door, Hans decided I'm jealous and wraps his arms around me, grabs my ass, and pulls me to him, saying something about not minding older girls. I told him to take his faking hands off me and slap him. My friend tries to convince me not to leave and then not to take the girls. I did anyway. It was so faked up. These 2 older men would most definitely have taken advantage of, if not outright raped, these 2 young girls. It faked me up for a week. Brought back memories of being treated like an object by men when I was younger. I haven't spoken to that guy since. I just ghosted. He is at best a sleazy drunken perv, and at worst a rapist and pedophile. He always used to complain how crazy and damaged women his age or even my age are. What he doesn't realize is that it is because we are unlucky enough to run into guys like him when we are young. He is the problem. I had met one of my best friends in the last year of school, and I thought this guy was fucking awesome until he made moves on almost every girl in our friend group and told the one he didn't hit on, "It's okay, I'd never hit on you. You're just not hot enough." That pissed a lot of people in the group off, but we kind of brushed it away. The guys weren't nearly as affected as the girls. To the guys he was a cunt every once in a while, but it was enough to get on our nerves, like just small pointless spats that he believed threatened his masculinity. Like arguing over pointless shit that doesn't get solved until someone has to look it up kind of shit. The ones that affected me directly was that one day the group decided to play strip cards, but it was restricted to top half only, not including bras. Everyone had a laugh until he started telling his other friends about it by putting it on his story on Snapchat. Well, as you can imagine, we weren't pleased, and the only shit he said to us was, "Nah man, it's chill." So we stole his phone and removed it. Then there was a time where everyone was at Mines for drinks, and after a few he decided it'd be a good idea to do some parkour. Obviously I wasn't okay with that. Like, no dead people in my backyard, thank you. There was no way I was backing down trying to get him to stop, because if I did then he would 100% die, and it ended with him saying "Hey lumbago 1383, Can you stop being a massive cunt for 2 seconds and let me prove myself? Was not happy in the slightest about that. He's lucky I didn't kick him out on the spot. And the third and last straw for me was the combination of hearing about how much of an asshole, the rappy vibes, how he had cheated on his now ex, now my current GF, and how he later that night, after hearing about how bad he is, he kissed another girl in the friend group. She then told him that she doesn't like him that way. He faking went in for another one. She started crying and came over to us. Told us the story. Whilst everyone was consoling her, I went outside to find him crying on the floor against the wall. Without skipping a beat, he came over to me pleading for help and asking for advice. Without blinking, I told him he doesn't deserve any sympathy from me and that he's a faking animal, that I regretted being friends with in the first place. I fell out with one of the people in our friends group. Let's call him Cole. Fake name obviously. I met him on a I.T course last year and we became friends with 3 other people. He's one of those people who try to be edgy, lies all the time, and he also lacks empathy for other people. About 2 months into the friendship, he made a joke about rape, and I told him it wasn't cool. He ignored me and just kept going, as if the joke was funny in the first place, but no one was laughing, and I told him to stop and said that his joke was disgusting and tasteless. He made the excuse that I should like the joke since I'm dark humored. I explained that I know someone who was raped by their friend and he just accused me of lying. I lost respect for him and started hanging with him less. There was another time Cole lied to our teacher, Steve, fake name again, about being ill so he could go home. Steve let him go and he ended up live streaming Fortnite, which was big at the time, which is how we caught him. I lent him about £4 and told him to pay me back on the following Monday. Monday comes and I ask him for my £4 and he tried to pretend he didn't borrow money. £4 is like $5.25 to Americans, and I nearly fell for it because I was stupid. At this point, I'm telling some of our other friends that I wanted nothing to do with him. My friend, who we'll call Looney, says that he only hangs out with him because my other friends do. But we are also saying all this without our other friend because we figured he'd tell everyone. Other instances was making homophobic and transphobic jokes, which again no one found funny, including "Did you assume my gender?" Because that was funny the first 500 times I heard it. Made me fail one of my courses. I have ASD, and he was distracting me with memes, but this is kind of my fault. This one is edited in, but I just remembered this. Several times he pushed me into a window, as which caused me to nearly break it and caused my arm to bruise badly. When the course was over, and this is going to sound pretty scummy, I actually tried to convince him to join another level of the course or join a whole different course, and this did work out first, but then he decided to join level 2 I.T, which both of us eventually dropped from, and I dropped out of college completely. Once lived with 2 girls, one I had known for 10 plus years. We'll call her S. The other girl, we'll call her G. We knew through her cousin, who was one of our good friends. We had been living together for about a year. It was a bunch of fun for a while. S had a B.F. We'll call him B, who was a pretty nice guy. He would come over and hang out with us all, as well as a bunch of other friends. We would often go out as a group and drink. At the time I was closer to G, but still loved S, as we had so much history, and she was really the most amazing friend. I just seemed to vibe with G a lot more. After about 3 months of them dating, things started to fizzle out, and S and B broke up. Around this time G started to go to her cousins and parents' house quite a bit. We didn't think anything was odd about this. One day, in the car, G turned to me smiling and said, "I've got something to tell you." I thought she was going to tell me she got a promotion or something with how excited she seemed. Only, her response instead was, "I've been seeing B secretly." All I could say was, "How the fuck could you put me in this position?" I don't know what reaction she was expecting from me, but the one I gave her was obviously not the one she thought. Her tone changed to slight panic, and she said, "I thought you would find it funny." The rest of the car ride was very silent. Unfortunately, I wasn't very good at being the bearer of bad news. I'm still not, and the thought of seeing S so upset made me keep my mouth shut. I ended up being awkward round G and shutting her out, going out with different friends by myself when I had previously always invited G with me. She eventually told her parents that we were bullying her, and they helped her move out, all the while lying us as they carried her stuff to the car. It was actually G's cousin who broke the news to S, and understandably, S was annoyed with me for not telling her. Things were a little strained for a while, but she forgave me as she is just that good of a person. S later told me that she forgave G and invited her for drinks with her new partner. Apparently when S fell asleep, G tried to get S's new partner sleep with her. He was a nice guy, so declined and told G to leave. I'm very glad that girl is out of my life. However, every now and then she pops out of nowhere to make her presence very much known. A 6-year friendship ended because of a stupid argument that got way out of hand. She is that kind of person who is way too comfortable sharing all of her trauma with friends and didn't like the fact that I didn't tell her absolutely everything about mine and threatened to drop me as a friend if I didn't tell her, even though I warned her that it would trigger a meltdown because that particular thing was extremely traumatic for me. I should have dropped out of the conversation and went away. I really should have. Or just lied to her about it, but I was so emotionally dependent on her and was terrified of losing her, and I caved in, and the meltdown ensued, which resulted in self-harm and going absolutely off the wall at her, telling her to go choke for all I cared. Now she had a near drowning incident not long before the argument, and this upset her quite a bit, and I don't remember much of the conversation aside from us hurling extremely hurtful things at each other. When we next spoke a few days later, I apologized for what I've done, but she wasn't having any of it and told me a lot of hurtful things, including her saying that our friendship wasn't genuine and that I exhaust her. And even when I tried to bring up how she was also at fault, after I warned her repeatedly, she refused to even apologize or even acknowledge it was part of the problem. Note that she was also prone to breakdowns and I'd have to talk her down over the phone to keep her from hurting herself, and the way she rambled on, so she above all people should know that you can't help yourself during a breakdown. Because of losing this friend, someone who I made life plans with, I developed depression and have attempted to end my life twice, and I've fallen back into bad habits. My work performance failed to the point I quit before they could fire me, and I'm still not any better, no matter how hard I try to work through it. The kicker of it was when 5 months after our fight, she sent a friend to accuse me of being a creep, sending multiple gifts to her house. I only sent one gift, an apology bear, and don't recall sending any others, and even then the bear was sent at least a week at the latest after the fight, and stalking her social media, even though she always had her social media privatized and had since blocked me, so even if I did want to stalk her, I would not have been able to. The friend also said how creepy it was of me to post about missing her, and that I should get over it. The irony of being accused of being a creepy stalker is the fact that my friend was most definitely stalking me, as those posts I made about missing who was essentially my soul sister were, at the newest, 6 weeks old, on a website, Quatev, that has no way of accessing specific posts, meaning that if you wanted to find specific posts you'd have to spend upwards of an hour scrolling through everything else. This friend of hers told me that if I wanted to make things better, I'd write her an apology for all of the things I've done, aka the bullshit things, and leave her alone. I had agreed to do it, but aside from half the things I was accused of were bullshit, I just couldn't finish it. I kept breaking down, and I had to stop before I did anything more to myself. I hate that I had grown so emotionally dependent on her for 6 years. I had nothing else in my life besides her. Every fandom we got into, almost everything we did together. The thing I hate myself the most for is that I wish that she'd talk to me and we'd become friends again and fix this mess, and all I'm doing is torturing myself with her impossible dream. Once during a hurricane my mom and I, F20, had been in the middle of moving into a new house. The new house was surrounded by pine trees, and we still had the old one, just no furniture or anything really. We packed up dogs and cats and went back to the old house to be safe. We were sitting on lawn chairs and sleeping on a pallet in my old room. I had a friend, let's call her Belle. I had known her 15 plus years. Weird life circumstances meant she found out late in life that she had siblings that I never met. Important for later. We never lost power and our wireless hotspot didn't go out. but it was still raining and we had mondo wind. She was messaging me that her family was arguing around her and being nasty to her and that the hurricane was giving her a panic attack. She knew it would be quieter with us, so she was asking if I'd come get her. In the middle of a hurricane. I told her I wasn't comfortable driving in those high winds. So she starts messaging my mom. She manages to guilt and manipulate my mom into picking her up. She lives maybe 20 minutes away, with perfect weather. My mom goes out in the middle of the night to pick this chick up. And mom gets there, and Belle hadn't told her family that she was leaving, and the only way they were letting her leave is if her older brother comes too. So mom comes back with 2 people and basically their luggage maybe an hour and a half later. They get into my house and mom and I give them our only 2 chairs, because we weren't planning on people being there. Belle and brother pull out whiskey and start drinking. Brother starts complaining that I'm quiet and boring. I'm just sitting there trying to stay awake at that point. There is now a stranger in that I'm trapped with. I'm already uncomfortable. Now we had power, but we weren't trying to run up 2 houses worth of electric bills. So we weren't using much AC. I guess brother gets hot. Dude bro asks me, do you mind if I'm a little racist? And I'm having major alarm bells going off because I'm stuck in this house and the hurricane has gotten bad enough my mom won't go out again. I also thought he might be making a stupid joke. So I just quietly shrug and prepare myself to some stupid humor about the movie we were watching. He takes off his shirt and has a swastika tattooed on his chest. Excuse me. That's not a little racist. That's big racist. And my friend just smiled. He said he didn't believe in it anymore and he got it while in prison. I know what we should have done. Sent them out, had someone pick them up then and there, whatever. But if you've never been a female with a clearly larger male and obvious hatred for people, then I don't want to hear about what I should have done. I wasn't doing anything that could potentially put me or my mom at risk. But being stuck in close proximity and not being able to get rid of a potential psycho, I decided I was going to go to bed so I can get up early and have someone come pick them up. Due to hurricane we made sure to bring a couple items with us so they'd be safe with us. One of these items was a gun, so I made my mom aware of the psycho in the living room and we slept with the gun under our pillow. So in summary, this chick decides to manipulate my mom into picking her up in the middle of the night in a hurricane, thinks I'm going to entertain her, then brings along an artsy sympathizer, and I'm stuck with them all night long. So yeah, I'd say friendship over.